Every night, Chuck has the same dream: how the zombie apocalypse begins in the world and vile monsters destroy people. A nightmare in which the whole world has plunged into hell, and Chuck in it is a hunter who lives to destroy zombies. In his dreams, he fights monsters with chains, blows them up, and just when it seems that he has defeated them, an earthquake begins. With a noisy rumble, the asphalt begins to crack, and suddenly a huge worm with 1,000 teeth appears from the ground. The monster is about to swallow Chuck, and the dream is cut short, warning the guy that the quest to save the world has failed, and he himself is dead. Waking up all in a cold sweat, the hero goes to see a psychotherapist. Nightmares in Chuck's life appeared for no reason about 2 years ago, in which he watched the deaths of defenseless people over and over again. It seemed that his life was completely destroyed. He was dying physically and psychologically. He had to go to a psychiatrist. Chuck was prescribed treatment, which included conversations, hypnosis, and medication. However, the nightmares did not stop, and the guy was advised to write them down in detail in a notebook. Writing them down, Chuck began to look for ways out of different situations, and using them, his dreams began to gradually change. The guy complains to psychotherapist Monica about his realization that some people can be scarier than zombies. In his dreams, he saw only a couple of people who tried to help him in his struggle, but ended up dying. Seeing the anxiety on the patient's face, Monica, in order to calm him down, promises to help him if something happens, and now offers to have lunch together. They enter the cafe and begin to have lunch, when suddenly one of the customers begins to argue with the slow cashier. The man is angry. He is afraid to miss the bus, and the cashier is in no hurry to issue a check and only stands silently behind the counter. Chuck cannot believe what he sees. Blood begins to flow from the eyes of the cafe worker, and his teeth are bared. Right here and now, the guy's dream turns into reality. He has seen a similar picture more than once in his nightmares. A cafe employee jumps out from behind the cash register and, jumping on top of a visitor, knocks him down and sinks his teeth into his face. Turning around and looking out the window, Chuck sees hordes of zombies attacking people. His hands begin to tremble. His body is covered with sweat. Monica screams. A monster runs at the guy from behind, its mouth open. Grabbing a bowl of soup, Chuck hits the zombie on the head with it, knocking him down. However, the monster is not so easy to get rid of, and grabbing a mop lying in the corner, the guy begins to beat him with it. Chuck sticks the tip of a broken mop into the zombie's neck, and it falls to the floor with wild wheezing. The hero understands that because of countless nightmares at the moment of realizing the reality of what is happening, he was able to think sensibly. Monica is shocked that Chuck just killed the monster in front of her eyes, and the guy explains that his dream has become a reality. Suddenly, the sound of an explosion is heard outside, and he remembers how a gas station exploded in his nightmares. Turning to the window, Chuck realizes that there can be no doubt anymore. His dreams have become real. And this means that soon all people will be destroyed and human civilization will completely fall. Suddenly, a sensory scoreboard appears in front of Chuck right in the air, which he has also repeatedly seen in his dreams. The scoreboard says that the current quest, called the Great Guardian, involves protecting Professor Monica. The hero is given 3 hours to complete it, and the acquisition of a new skill is announced as a reward. It is necessary to give an answer whether Chuck agrees to complete the quest, and despite the fact that in the dream he did not manage to complete it, the guy agrees. He has the feeling that this time he will be able to change the future, full of despair. Monica asks if Chuck is okay, and the guy realizes that only he sees the sign. There was something that the patient was never able to write down in his dream notebook. The moment when the professor was attacked by a monster, turning her into a zombie. The living dead burst into the room, and Chuck shouts to Monica to get out of there as soon as possible. Running out of the cafe, they head to the warehouse, from where, in his nightmares, the guy took weapons for the fight. He and Monica go inside and close the metal door behind them. After rummaging through the boxes, Chuck takes out a heavy chain and wraps it around his arm with a clank. He asks Monica to get ready, as they will face zombies until they get to his house. So the quest begins. Chuck goes out of the warehouse into the street, and angry monsters pounce on him from all sides. Deftly wielding the chain, he knocks the zombies down one by one, and they fly away from him in different directions. Perhaps it is because Chuck has already experienced all this in his dreams that he wields chains very confidently. After clearing their way of monsters, Monica and her boyfriend run as fast as they can to a quiet area in the city where there is no danger in sight. Finding an abandoned house, They enter it, and feeling relieved, the therapist falls to the floor. Helping the girl to stand on her still shaking legs, Chuck sits her on the couch so she can rest. Again, a sign appears in front of him, this time informing him about the completion of the first quest. Now Chuck should receive the next skill, which will be passed on to him by the master. By the master, the plaque means a person who is indebted to the guy, and in this case, it is Professor Monica. Chuck activates the transmission skill, and he and the girl find themselves in a bright red glowing circle that resembles a compass. However, Monica has absolutely no reaction to what is happening. It is obvious that she does not see this either. However, the tablet congratulates Chuck on the new skill he has gained, according to which he will now be able to heal someone's soul. Monica lights a cigarette. She does not understand how everything that was described in her patient's notebook can really happen. The girl even assumes that she is also having a nightmare, and because of this, her condition is close to a nervous breakdown. Chuck has encountered this in his dreams more than once, so he understands that now is the time to use the acquired skill. The skill is activated, and the tablet informs that the soul healing has been successfully completed, and the person's soul has become stronger. After extinguishing the cigarette, Monica is sincerely glad that they are still alive, and asks Chuck not to be discouraged, because the world must become a better place. The guy is fascinated by his acquired ability to adopt skills, and a plan is brewing in his head. In the village where he comes from, there are many professionals of all kinds of crafts and arts. With the help of the past skill, Chuck will be able to easily master all these skills for further fighting. A few months ago, exhausted from 10 nightmares in a row, Chuck met in his native village of the elders. One of them was the 78-year-old great carpenter John, who was engaged in the construction of temples, castles, and palaces. The second, Puck Dalbon, is a 73-year-old master of the divine demonic martial art that has been passed down to him through 23 generations. The men noticed that the guy was wearing no face at all, and John reported that he had some red ginseng extract, which could add energy. Chuck refuses because ginseng is a very expensive plant, but the elders insist that he accept their gift. And now, remembering these people, the guy leaves the house and, getting on a bike, starts it to go to meet them. Monica tries to stop him because he is going to the center of the city, which is literally teeming with monsters. Chuck asks her not to worry because the professor saw how he recently defeated a whole crowd of zombies. The girl asks him to take care of himself, but warns that if he gets bitten by a zombie, she won't open the door for him. Putting a helmet on his head, Chuck rushes off to save John and Puck, who, as always, will be together now. Following him with her eyes and lighting a cigarette, Monica thinks that this year, apparently, she will not be able to quit smoking either. John, shaking, hides under the desk of the office, crowded with zombies prowling in search of people. Suddenly, one of them notices the old man's bald head sticking out from behind the table and attacks him with a wild roar. John screams in fear, but Puck comes to his aid, who seals the zombies to the table with one powerful blow. After making sure that everything is all right with his friend, he puts himself on alert to repel the invasion of a crowd of monsters approaching them. Chuck is confident in the power of Elder Puck, who can single-handedly kill a whole pack of zombies, but in his nightmares, the elders have always died. Now, the guy has 2 reasons to head to them, and he hopes that when he arrives, it won't be too late. Elder John watches in awe as his friend deals with zombies whose bodies lie motionless all over the office. Suddenly, they notice that a huge 3-meter monster is moving in their direction, much more ferocious than those that Puck has already coped with. He moves forward, grabbing zombies in his path and eating them on the move. Jumping high, Puck flies over the monster and covers its head with blows from his strong fist. The elder and the monster are fighting in a fierce battle, and at that moment, a strong crunch is heard in Puck's back. Chuck runs into the office just when the first problem that the guy thought about on the way occurs. The elder's sore back makes itself felt. The second problem that needs to be solved is a huge mutant zombie. Chuck shouts to the elders that he has come to save them and that they need to get out of here quickly. John helps Puck, who is apologizing for the pain in his back, to his feet, and they hurry out of the office. The elder yells for Chuck to get out after them, because this monster is not like everyone else. The guy asks not to worry about him and go first because in any case, his motorcycle has only 2 seats. After seeing them off, Chuck realizes that there are many more monsters than he thought and doubts if he can handle them. Again, a sign appears in front of his eyes offering to get the skill of a master with a specialization who is in his debt. Chuck adopts his skill, and the next moment, in front of the surprised elders, he destroys the monsters one by one, using Puck's martial arts skills. The guy easily deals with even a mutant zombie, and the scoreboard highlights the new skill he has acquired, the possession of a divine demonic martial art. The elders can't believe that this nervous snot, unable to cope with nightmares, wields such fighting techniques. Tableau informs Chuck of the activation of the demonic control of the heart in his body, and he can now sense mana. Before he has time to think about what mana is, his hand begins to glow, and his body feels an extraordinary lightness. Just as Chuck thought, even if saving Puck was a dangerous choice, he had gained the necessary demonic control skill in return. Noticing that the elders haven't left yet, he heads to them to return together. However, a growl is heard from behind, and turning around, Chuck sees that the zombie monster is still alive. It, as in the dream, turned out to be very strong. The boy assures the elders that he will be fine and asks them to leave, promising to catch up with them when he is done with the monster. Chuck sends the elders to the house where they will be met by Professor Monica, and as they leave, they ask him to return alive. The guy attacks the monster with the chain, but it snatches it and tears it in half. Angry, Chuck jumps up and kicks the zombie in the face with all his might. It's 8 o'clock in the evening. Monica is sitting on the couch and smoking nervously, waiting for her patient to return. Hearing the familiar roar of a motorcycle, she runs out onto the porch, only to find two old men there. The elders explain that they were sent here by Chuck, who saved them, but himself lingered to continue fighting the zombies. The angry guy deals crushing blows to the monster one by one, using the mana management skill. Finally, the monster is defeated, it falls, and a ruby falls out of its forehead, which, running up to it, grabs Chuck from the ground. A scoreboard lights up, informing that this is a catalyst, a magic stone, when used to increase the level of the item. The elders and Monica turn on the TV. The news is broadcasting a message from the Ministry of National Defense. According to it, large-scale riots of unknown cause are currently spreading in the country. Since then, a national disaster has been officially declared, and the ministry advises everyone to stay at home. Everyone present rejoices when they hear a knock on the door, followed by Chuck's voice. Monica hopes that the guy is okay, and Park states that he is very proud of him. John thanks him for saving the old people and praises him for a job well done. Chuck is embarrassed, but immediately a scoreboard appears that he can acquire the skill of an elder who is in his debt. The guy activates the transfer of the wood architecture skill, which he can use in the construction of wooden structures. Elder Park is interested in how Chuck managed to master the divine demonic martial art, since he did not teach him. The guy doesn't know how to explain it to him, so he replies with a smile that it's just his skill. Monica wonders if he is really talking about the skills that can be found in games. To show it clearly, Chuck activates the tree architecture skill, and the ground begins to shake as if during an earthquake. Suddenly, a huge wooden beam bursts out of the ground, followed by another and another. Just a few seconds later, the four of them are standing, surrounded by a tall wooden fence of sharpened stakes. John can't believe his eyes because even he, being an experienced tree scientist, has never seen anything like this before. The wood from which the fence is built is not inferior in strength to hard metal. Chuck admits that he got this skill from an elder who can't believe it because he didn't teach him his craft. He explains that this is the same skill he told them about earlier, and Puck now understands where the guy knows the martial art from. In the past, he had taken on students to cultivate this martial art. However, none of them had even passed the introductory lesson. And when Park was about to give up everything, his granddaughter Iso came to the elder and asked her grandfather to teach her. The girl had an innate talent for martial arts, and after 18 years of rigorous training, she became Park's successor. However, the overwhelming and destructive strength and power that Chuck unleashes is obviously beyond the control of either Iso or Park himself. Suddenly, a mana depletion board appears in front of the guy due to excessive use of the skill. Chuck begins to feel dizzy and, having lost his balance, he falls. The tablet says that a forced rest has begun in order to restore mana. Waking up on his bed in his room, Chuck learns from the scoreboard about mana regeneration. It becomes obvious that skills cannot always be used, because if mana drops to 0 while fighting zombies, it will immediately become food for them. Monica enters the room with a glass of water on a tray. She was very concerned about Chuck's condition. The professor suggests that he go outside if he has already recovered, since everything is already ready there. Monica and Chuck go out into the courtyard, where the elders are cooking meat for dinner on a fire. From the outside of the fence, the knocking of zombies can be heard, roaring as they try to break through the high fence. Chuck does not understand why the elders decided to have dinner in the courtyard, because monsters are crowded behind the fence. However, John is absolutely calm, because this fence turned out to be stronger than steel, and it will stand even if a car crashes into it. The elder had lived a long life, but he had never seen such a strong barricade before. Chuck is very happy to hear this, although it is still strange for him to eat a barbecue in a situation like this. However, according to Monica, it is precisely because of the current situation that they should enjoy life more. As Chuck has a fun dinner while talking, he notices how different the situation is now from his 99 nightmares. After all, in nightmares, the zombie-infested world became more and more hell every day. And what is happening now is more like Chuck is in a healing camp. The Ministry of National Defense is waging a fierce battle against zombies, opening fire on them. However, more than 1,000 monsters are already attacking them, and the commander asks for reinforcements. At 7 in the morning, Chuck is woken up by a newly received tablet, which reads about the completion of a hidden quest to rescue 3 professors. As a reward, the hero receives a new skill, analysis, which can be used to obtain information about the target. Looking out into the courtyard, Chuck sees the elders doing their morning gymnastics, and Monica smoking while sitting in a chair and watching them. The guy decides to try his new skill and analyzes his associates. According to the analysis, none of these people have a rating assigned to them. Looking at the objects in the room, Chuck analyzes them too, but neither the TV nor the couch has a rating. Then the guy comes up with the idea of using the catalyst he received yesterday to affect objects. Monica is interested in what Chuck is looking at like a treasure, and he shares his guesses with her. When asked why the guy has not yet tested the stone, he replies that he is thinking about how to use it more profitably. Chuck decides to move away for a while, but Monica is against it, because it has not been long since he lost consciousness. However, the guy needs to make sure of something, and getting on a motorcycle, he leaves. Chuck drives into a completely destroyed village, where zombies are scurrying everywhere in search of a new victim. Clearing his way with a chain, the guy punches forward through the crowds of monsters. Chuck is convinced that this time everything is different, and the real nightmare has not yet begun in the village. He convinces the explosion to move away and realizes that he needs to get there first. Realizing that it will not be easy, Chuck winds the chain around his arm and prepares to fight the approaching zombies. A column of military personnel from the Ministry of National Defense is moving along the highway. The commander wants to capture the black monster alive in order to get a special promotion. A crowd of zombies appears on the horizon, and he gives the command to kill them on the spot with charges. The commander is calm. He is sure that the monsters will not be able to resist the tank. However, a huge monster suddenly lands on top of the tank, covering it with its tentacles and opening its toothy mouth. On the other hand, the army is attacked by giant mutant zombies, and on the third by lizard-like monsters. Chuck watches from the hill as they destroy all the soldiers one by one, tearing them apart. Everything happens very quickly. Reality and the guy's nightmares are less and less similar to each other. The number of zombie species has already increased to 10, and most importantly, a multi-legged, toothy monster has also appeared here. This monster easily destroys tanks, breaking them apart like toy cars. By activating his analysis skills, Chuck learns that he is facing a special kind of monster. Its name is Stalker, and its feature is an extremely developed sense of smell. Chuck can no longer delay. He needs to act. A plan is brewing in his head, and he gets back on the motorcycle. Every summer, the Artisan Village hosts a fireworks festival for tourists. The festival was supposed to be held tonight, so there had to be a little left. Chuck climbs onto an empty ship and finds what he thought are fireworks charges in excellent condition. He just needed to tweak them a little and use them right away, even though the guy didn't think he'd have to resort to them so soon. To deal with a huge horde of zombies, Chuck decides to use a catalyst to upgrade his weapons. The guy applies the stone to the chains. The reinforcement is successful, and the power of the chains is also transferred to his hands. He looks from the roof of the building at the approaching monsters and decides that it's time to start with his plan. Chuck presses the detonator button and fireworks begin to explode on the ship. Taking advantage of the fact that the zombies are fascinated and dumbfounded by the lights soaring into the sky, the guy jumps off the roof. Jumping on the shoulders of the mutant zombie, Chuck bandages his throat with chains and, pulling them on, cuts his head off his torso. Lizard-like zombies release their long tongues towards the guy to grab him. However, Chuck activates the tree architecture skill, and trees grow out of the ground, shielding him from the monster's tongues. Without wasting a minute, he appears from the side and chops off the heads of the lizards. 3 more catalyst rubies roll out at Chuck's feet, and he picks them up from the ground. Now his chains have been improved 3 times, and the guy no longer doubts that he will destroy all the surrounding zombies. Meanwhile, the monster stalker gets to the ship with fireworks, and having turned it over, drowns it in the sea. After finishing the ship, he comes to the aid of other zombies, whom Chuck mercilessly kills with his chains. By the time the stalker arrived, the guy had strengthened his chains to the 5th level, reaching the limit of power-ups. Now, when he brings another catalyst to the chains, he strengthens them to a special ability, fire chains. Although the ship has sunk, Chuck is sure that the real fireworks are just beginning, and his hands are embraced by the incredible power of fire. Kim Sebastian, 65, a professor of ethology, sits in his mansion with a squirrel on his knee and reads a book. Kim studies the behavior of animals due to their genetic characteristics. The male raven Mon flies to the professor, bringing a note on his paw. The sender of the letter thanks Kim for contacting him and asks the professor to be careful. He is happy to learn that the sender is alive and hopes that all members of the endangered animal protection community are safe. Noticing exploding fireworks in the distance, Kim is surprised, assuming that it is zombies fooling around with fireworks. At the beginning of the zombie invasion of the village, the professor was warned of the danger by a squirrel that jumped from a tree on his shoulder. Now the squirrel has done the same, and so Kim decides to trust the animal's instincts once again. Thanks to the skill of analysis, Chuck sees that the stalker is able to release poisonous webs, and now he attacks him in this way. But the guy has already figured out his new skill, and he releases fiery fists in response to this. Engulfed in flames, the monster rushes along the asphalt, emitting wild screams. The stalker burns, and Chuck is surrounded by crowds of other zombies of different types, ready to attack. Waving fire chains in different directions, the hero cuts the zombies. Their heads fly to the sides. A couple of minutes later, Chuck is standing in the middle of the road, surrounded by mountains of corpses. Reaching the village and standing among the destroyed buildings, Kim is surprised because, for some reason, there are no zombies around. Seeing a bright flash of fire in the distance and thinking that the military must be there, the professor runs in this direction. Running to the square, he freezes in amazement. In the middle of the road, there are mountains of dead zombies, and a guy is standing on the largest of them. The hero turns to Kim, and he is even more surprised because Chuck is standing in front of him. The professor cannot understand how this guy was able to single-handedly destroy all these zombies. The squirrel on the professor's shoulder begins to squeak, and raising their heads, all 3 see a meteorite-like ball flying from the sky. Chuck and the professor quickly jump on the motorcycle as the balloon flies straight in their direction, but manage to drive away. The guy had never seen such a thing even in his nightmares. Hitting the ground, the ball began to spread along the roads with a violet acid glow. More and more zombies rise from this goo, which are drawn in the direction of the hero who has prepared the chain for battle. After activating the analysis skill, Chuck learns that these are blown-up zombies that are particularly resilient. The guy strikes the first blow with the chain, but physical attacks are ineffective in this case. These zombies are resistant to fire. However, Chuck also notices that the monsters are unable to cross the purple zone. Therefore, now he decides to temporarily retreat and return home with the professor. When he gets home, Kim is amazed at what a stunning barricade Chuck has erected. After knocking on the gate and waiting for an answer from the inside, the guy analyzes the gate and finds out that its strength has dropped a little. Despite the late night, none of those who remained at home slept. They saw both fireworks and a meteorite that fell to the ground. Noticing his old friend Kim with Chuck, John is glad that he is still alive. The boy asks the elders to postpone the greetings, as he needs to tell them about the meteorite that fell. Sitting on the living room floor, Chuck tells the crowd about what is happening in the village. John is worried about the survivors, as they are probably running out of food, and it is not known how long they will last. Kim finds a solution to the problem because he has smart, trained crows that can help with food delivery. The only problem is that the crows are still in his house, which is most likely already surrounded by zombies. Chuck realizes that with the help of these crows, it will take less time to save the rest of the experts in the artisan village. He thinks about how he can break through the crowds of zombies. For this, he needs a new path. After upgrading the weapon, he only had 4 magic stones left. Chuck doesn't know how many stones he'll need to awaken one of the expert's abilities, and he needs the help of everyone present. They all go out into the courtyard, taking one magic catalyst each, and a sign appears in front of each of them. All professors can now use these gems to awaken and enhance their special abilities. All four begin to activate their skills, and each of them begins to experience some kind of feeling. Puck feels a special surge of strength. Hitting the ground with his fist, he leaves a deep dent in it. In the next moment, the elder bitterly realizes that although the stone has improved his strength, it has not cured his back pain. John, who has also strengthened his skills, has already managed to build a small model of a wooden castle, and now he admires it. Monica analyzes the people around her and, turning to Chuck, reaches out to him and activates the ability to heal souls. The girl touches the guy's cheek, and he feels embarrassed, as well as how the level of joy and calmness in his heart increases. Suddenly, Professor Kim has an idea, and he shares it with the others. If they can't walk on the ground because of monsters, then they should move through the sky. 2 days have passed, and everyone is preparing to implement their plan. Professor John, using his mana, grows huge trees on the roof of the house. Professor Park trains Chuck in order to perfect his mastery of the divine demonic martial art. He shows the guy his special blow, the chaotic dance of a ferocious tiger, and his fists move at incredible speed. Suddenly, Professor Kim descends from above with a winged squirrel, informing them that the time has come. During this time, Chuck learned a lot. He trained, learned to communicate with animals, and adopted a new skill from the squirrel, the wing suit. Having bitten into a chocolate bar with a sense of absolute self-confidence, the guy's ready to proceed with his plan. Together with Professor Kim, Chuck activates the wooden construction skill, and both of them find themselves on a very tall pillar from which the entire village can be seen. Jumping off it, they activate the wingsuit, and now both are floating in the air on a par with the accompanying squirrel. Apparently, only the streets are filled with monsters and lilac goo. They do not enter houses, which pleases Chuck. However, he also notices that the zombies are throwing the bodies of the people they killed beyond the lilac limits for something. Chuck can't believe his eyes. The remnants of the goo from the corpses flow down onto the killed zombies and resurrect them again, making them stronger than before. But now the guy decides to focus on his goal and continues to fly in the direction of Professor Kim's house. They fly into the house through the balcony, and the crows happily rush to meet the professor. Upon touching them, Kim gains new power, and 2 huge black wings appear behind him. Together with the crows, the professor and Chuck soar into the air, and from below they are noticed by zombies made of purple goo. Suddenly, they raise their arms up, which stretch so high that they can hook the heroes. These hands rush next to each other so quickly that Chuck and Kim can fall down. So the guy takes out his chain and swings it right on the fly. He yells at the professor to fly on, and he plans to stay behind to distract the zombies, and promises to return soon. Chuck activates the fireworks skill and fires the monsters gathered below in the purple goo. Sinking to the ground, he hears footsteps behind him and, turning around, sees the stalker approaching, who has become stronger than before. Chuck begins to fight, but even as he rises into the air, the monster, eating other zombies, grows in size and rises up as well. The guy understands that he cannot cope with the stalker. He needs to get out of here and rest. Chuck manages to somehow escape from there and sits down to rest on the floor in one of the nearby buildings. Outside the window, he notices something strange. The ground around one of the neighboring houses nearby is completely untouched by purple slurry. Chuck decides to go there and figure it out for himself, because there must be something special in this house, if this happens. Approaching the house, he hears some strange sound, like ringing in his ears, coming from the house, and suddenly notices a man on the balcony. The man looks quite anxious, so Chuck activates the Heal Soul skill to calm him down and talk. The man, surprised by a living person, asks if the guy has any food with him, and he shows him the bar. Chuck enters a house furnished with musical instruments and speakers. He meets the owner, 56-year-old Ryu Dontak, a former professor of acoustics. Chuck's ears are constantly ringing, which is very surprising to the man, because human hearing is not able to catch this sound wave. As it turned out, the professor himself installed this low-frequency sound, and therefore monsters do not approach his house. Rue suggests that Chuck give him the sound as a file so that he can scare the zombies away as well. Kim flies home, and Park, who meets him in the yard, is impressed by the professor's wings. When asked by the elder where Chuck went, Kim talks about how the guy fell in the village, saving him. Puck is beside himself with anger. He doesn't see the point in these wings if the guy's hurt, but the professor asks him to calm down and talks about the zombies' lengthening arms. John finds out that Chuck fell into that hellish sludge and tries to stop Puck, who is about to go to save the guy. Monica also believes that it is dangerous for the elder to go because there are too many monsters and he also has a back pain. The girl asks everyone to stay calm and asks Professor Kim if it is possible to send supplies with the help of crows. Having found out that monsters do not attack animals, everyone decides to deal with supplies and observation for the time being. They need a strong fighter, and since he must be a reliable person, Park offers to take his granddaughter as an assistant. The crowd agrees to trust ISO, and Park suggests that she can be found at the demonic martial arts school. Professor Kim calls his raven Monman, and showing him a photo of the girl, sends him to look for him. The rest of the crows are given food supplies, sending them to the village to help the surviving people. Chuck is just saying goodbye to Ryu when they spot birds approaching in the sky with food in their claws. Convinced of the truthfulness of what the guy said, the man asks to take him with him. Chuck gladly agrees to fulfill his request and prepares to receive the skill from a grateful expert. By activating the transmission, the guy acquires a new skill, acoustics, with which you can move sound into objects. After that, Chuck transfers the skill to his chain, which now has the mana of acoustics. And thanks to this, it will not be difficult to escape from here. Suddenly, they hear a meow, and turning to the sound, they see a kitten nearby. Rue runs into the house and takes out cat food with bowls to feed the animal. After the kitten is eaten, Chuck strokes it and activates the ability to communicate with animals. The kitten, whose name is Terry, likes the guy. And for this, Chuck receives a new skill, replacing wings with agility. He tries to use this mana, and instead of legs, he gets cat's paws, which allow him to move from one place to another at lightning speed. Chuck suggests that the professor move forward, but according to Ryu, it will be difficult for the two of them to move around. Therefore, the man decides to stay in his house, which is quite safe, and asks only to leave him supplies. Chuck was so worried about his nightmares that he bought a bunch of things to survive, so sharing with Ryu is not difficult for him. Leaving the gate, the guy tests the new skill in practice, and stepping on the purple ground, realizes that due to the agility of the zone, it does not react to it in any way. Chuck runs, moving forward very quickly, and activating the acoustic skill destroys the zombies that stand in his way. Previously, no attacks had any effect on monsters from the purple zone, but now everything is different. There are decapitated zombies everywhere. After destroying all of them, Chuck is pleased to notice how many catalysts have fallen out of their heads. As a reward for 10 killed infected zombies, the hero receives a 10-kilogram inventory in the form of a small bag. The pouch pops out of Chuck's hands and begins to pick up spilled catalysts from the ground. Suddenly, the ground around begins to tremble. An improved stalker runs towards the guy. Picking up the inventory, which has transformed many red gems into one orange gem, Chuck activates it. He can now level up his weapon to the next level and strengthen his fire chains. The Mana Dragon of Blue Flame is activated, with the help of which Chuck rushes to attack the stalker. At some point, it seems that the monster has weakened as it stands still, but suddenly the purple earth begins to pull towards it. He becomes even stronger than before. His arms turn into sharp spears, and the stalker rushes at Chuck. The thought of how big the reward will be for killing this zombie pushes the guy into battle. A man is watching the fight from the roof of a neighboring building through binoculars. He is surprised at how deftly the guy copes with zombies and how many magic stones he must have managed to collect for this. The man in uniform thinks he'd rather take Chuck as an ally. However, the one in the suit is sure that in this case, the guy will quickly betray and defeat them. Sticking out his long tongue, he imagines how many magic stones they will be able to get from Chuck. Looking through the binoculars again, he discovers that in addition to red catalysts, there are also orange ones. The man is happy because this time he expects a big reward from the upcoming hunt. Chuck picks up his inventory, and once again a sign appears in front of him about receiving a new reward in connection with the killing of the world's first mutant zombie. With the proclamation of territory reward, you can provide special effects to allies in that territory. At the very moment when Chuck is about to leave, the people who were watching him come up to him. The guy does not believe his eyes. He recognizes Peter Hendricks and the man in the suit of a livestalker. In 2021, Peter was awarded as a young entrepreneur at the International Youth Mental Leadership Ceremony. Among other things, this man was known for his large donations to various foundations. In fact, Peter was a psychopathic killer who enjoyed the deaths of people. Chuck knows this because he has seen in his nightmares how Hendricks reveals his true nature. Hanging his victims on poles by their hands, he, together with his comrades in arms, mocked them and then killed them. This serial killer hiding his identity is #1 on Chuck's list to deal with. The guy believes that he is lucky to meet Peter, and he begins to analyze his opponents. The first of them, 25-year-old Sam, and the second, his peer Kevin, were identified as ordinary people, devourers of human magical stones. Patrick has been identified as a beast eater and magic stone eater, which likely means that they all mine catalysts by killing people. Raising his hands, he asks not to misunderstand them, because according to him, they came in peace and are, like Chuck, awakened. Hendricks suggests that the guys stick together and reports on the camp they have set up in a store where there is a lot of food and people. Suddenly, the ground under the feet of everyone present begins to shake, and tentacles crawl out from under it. Once again, a new wave of zombies surrounds them, and they are all ready to attack. Patrick again offers Chuck to go to the camp, and the guy agrees. The hero activates the chains and begins to swing them, and Hendricks plans to get rid of him as soon as he lets his guard down. Chuck follows them, confident that thanks to his abilities, he will be able to get out of everywhere without much effort. Patrick activates the fear skill, and the zombies around them stop. The word dug in, and it is now easier to defeat them. Breaking out of the trap, the four of them reach the camp and stop to catch their breath and get to know each other. Patrick escorts Chuck to the door, behind which, according to him, the owner of a Chinese restaurant is waiting for them, and asks the guy not to be surprised since he is quite strange. Behind the open door, the guy sees a man sitting tied up on the floor with his mouth taped shut. Chuck analyzes it and learns that in front of him is a 30-year-old cook named Sonny without any rank. Patrick doesn't understand why Chuck isn't surprised by what he sees, but he's been warned that the man behind the door is weird. The guy wonders why the chef was tied up and assumes that in this world they don't kill just like that, and this person can be useful to them. Smiling, Chuck says that the life of a bound man must be worth a magic stone. Patrick laughs, amused by how openly the guy talks about the murders, assuming that he has met a like-minded person. Since childhood, Hendricks has had fun killing all living creatures that came in his way. No one could understand him, not even his parents, so he always played a role, hiding his real desires. Hendricks confesses to Chuck that he was going to kill him, but now he can't do that to one of his few like-minded people. Extending his hand to the guy, he invites him to unite to create a better world. Chuck shakes the outstretched hand, glad that his opponent has taken the bait of his trick. Due to the fact that the expert's favor has reached the desired level, Chuck is given a special skill of Hendricks, fear. Now, thanks to the mana transferred, the hero will be able to instill a sense of fear in the target. When asked by Patrick what skills Chuck has, the guy demonstrates his abilities of agility and fire chains. According to Hendricks, Sam and Kevin do not possess any skills, but the guy does not understand how they can awaken without having abilities. Although, on the other hand, if they had something, they would have already taken advantage of it in the battle against zombies. From this, Chuck deduces that ordinary people don't get skills after waking up. Suddenly, 3 zombies enter the store, which surprises the hero because these monsters can move outside the purple earth. Patrick suggests that Chuck join forces in the fight, and the guy agrees. Hendricks orders Sam and Kevin to clear the path just like they did before. Activating the fear skill, Patrick destroys monsters that enter the store. The 4 of them go out the door, where hordes of zombies are waiting for them, and Hendricks is confident that with Chuck's help, they will cope with everyone. Realizing that now is the time to act, the hero activates the wooden structure skill. Before Patrick and his associates know it, a high wooden fence is erected between them and Chuck. Hendricks screams in anger because the guy left them to fight a whole pack of zombies blocking their way to the camp. Sam and Kevin ask Patrick for help, but Patrick escapes, taking advantage of the zombies being distracted by his friends. However, the monsters catch Hendricks, and it already seems to him that he will soon come to an end. However, he wants to survive in order to get revenge on Chuck, no matter what it takes, even in human form, and so Peter begins to devour zombies. The wall built by the hero is strong enough for him to buy time, so he returns to the tied-up Chef Sonny. Chuck unties the hostage, but the hostage pulls away from him in fear and begs for mercy. The guy activates the soul cure, and having calmed down a little, Sonny advises him to run because this place is a nest of killers. There are more than 10 dead bodies in the boxes behind him, and it is very dangerous to stay here. Chuck knows this, which is why he's back to save Sonny, and hands the chef a catalyst to help him escape. Seeing the red guy, the cook began to get nervous, assuming that the guy in front of him was the same killer as Patrick. But after taking a closer look, Sonny realizes that this stone looks a little different, and he doesn't feel a terrible aura from it. After learning from Chuck that he got a catalyst by killing a zombie, the cook still takes it with words of gratitude. Picking up the rock and feeling the energy flow through his body, Sonny understands what those guys meant when they said they were waking up. He gains a skill that will cause any dish he cooks using mana to have a special effect. As Chuck thought, after waking up, anyone with an innate ability can gain a skill, with the exception of ordinary people. Now the hero understands how to make full use of the transfer of skills. After meeting Chuck, Sonny asks to take him with her, but first they need to prepare something and pack the groceries. Realizing that in his current situation it will be difficult for him to protect the cook, the hero decides to use the collected catalysts. Perhaps because Chuck has cast too many skills, his mana has begun to drop, and he is thinking about how to increase it. Taking the orange stone in his hands, the guy enhances his innate ability, transfer to the next level. By upgrading the analysis skill, he can now predict the movements of his target. Sonny enters the warehouse, who suggests that Chuck try a dish made with food he couldn't pack. The taste of the dish is simply amazing, and the sign says that if it is fully consumed, all parameters will be increased by 20% for 3 hours. Chuck eats every last crumb and feels that they can leave right now. Sonny doesn't know how to get out, as the entrance is blocked by a tall wooden fence. Reporting that this is not a problem and they will get out of here the other way, Chuck punches a hole in the floor with his chain. Taking supplies with them, the guys jump down and find themselves in a large pipe half filled with water. Now they have to move along the sewer pipes, but suddenly everything around begins to shake. It seems as if an earthquake has begun, but the pipe bursts and it is obvious that someone will appear here now. With wild screams of joy that Chuck has finally been found, a mutated Peter appears in the sewers. O has turned into a huge mutant zombie with Sam and Kevin's heads growing from each shoulder. Chuck asks the frightened Sonny to move away and activates the Analyze skill. The name of the mutant is Animal Eater. He belongs to the category of Infected Awakened, and his features are high-speed movement, a sword, 3 heads, and instilling fear in others. The beast activates fear, and Chuck activates Soul Heal, casting it on Sonny, who is just shaking with terror. Seeing this, Peter is convinced that the guy has a lot of different skills. After activating the Blue Flame Dragon, Chuck asks Sonny to return to the shop, otherwise he may be swept away by the wave. A battle begins, and by activating the Divination skill, the hero successfully dodges the blows of the Skinner. Sam and Kevin, frightened by Chuck's powers, suggest that their commander run away. Calling them useless garbage, the Animal Eater severs the cowardly heads of his former comrades in arms from his shoulders. Meanwhile, Chuck, who is watching a demonstration of the Fear skill, learns that soon after a long demonstration, he will be able to improve his ability. By fighting off the Skinner, the level of the Fear skill improves. Chuck applies an advanced level of mana and deals a crushing blow to the mutant with his own skill. The guy strikes the monster one after another, and he rushes to run, but his left arm is entwined with a chain and does not allow him to move. The Animal Eater abruptly breaks free and disappears into the pipe, leaving its severed arm lying in the water along with the orange crystal. Chuck calls out to Sonny, informing him that he managed to chase the monster away, and he will definitely not be back anytime soon. When they reach the hatch, they rise to the surface, and the cook wonders why the ground here is not touched by purple goo. Chuck explains that it's all thanks to the owner of the house standing here, and as he approaches the gate, he calls out to Professor Rue. The professor runs out at the call of the guy and is surprised to see the owner of a nearby restaurant, with whom they happen to be acquainted. Sonny reveals that Chuck saved him, and Ryu says the same, impressed by the hero's kindness. Since the hero is being chased by zombies, he offers the cook to stay with the professor for a while. Rue promises to gladly comply with his request, and he and Sonny shake hands. The cook thanks Chuck for his help, and now his skill can be transferred. Cooking can now create dishes with special effects. Since cocktail making is also considered cooking, Chuck starts mixing drinks. In this way, he has a cocktail that increases endurance by 10% and lasts for 10 minutes. The Animal Eater devours the zombies, and the severed arm begins to grow back from him. He makes a promise to himself to finish off Chuck, and suddenly sees the zombies around him kneeling. Looking in the same direction as them, he sees a winged figure approaching in their direction. Such a strong energy emanates from it that, unable to resist it, the Animal Eater also kneels. This female monster is far more powerful than anyone who has occupied these lands, and the others recognize her as their master. With a wave of his tail and a swing of it into the purple earth, the Overlord awakens another monster, a huge eye. Now you can see the face of the female monster, and it's the 24th Divine Demon Martial Arts Master, Iso Park. From an early age, Iso could not ignore the injustice towards anything. When the girl was 5 years old, she always fought with a bully from kindergarten who offended other children. When she was almost 6, she reconciled all the children, bringing peace to their relationship. When Grandpa Park asked what she was going to do with great power once she mastered it, Iso promised to protect everyone. At the age of 17, the girl began to sincerely spread her beliefs about a righteous life. One day, she saved a boy from hooligans who attacked him and took him to her school. After a year of training, he became Iso's younger comrade, and together with her, he defended those in need of help. Over time, many more followed her, and she, as she dreamed, found herself in a world where most people smiled. Even when the whole world turned into hell, Iso and his like-minded people fearlessly rushed into battle with zombies. The girl could not give up what she believed in, but one day a mutant zombie killed the guy she saved. Despite the fact that Iso and her like-minded people managed to save many lives, they still lost many people. Standing at the graves, they promised to destroy the monsters that had captured the village. But suddenly they noticed a meteorite flying from the sky. Iso could not move, fascinated by this radiance, and the students shielded her from the ball flying directly at them. Opening her eyes, the girl found that her brethren had turned into zombies. Before they could ask Iso to run away, they were all torn apart, and the goo flew in different directions, covering the girl. Another moment, and she turned into the same monster woman who had only one thought in her head: to kill everyone. Turning to Her Majesty Iso, the eye offers to eat all of them in order to become perfect. Stretching his stinging tail directly into his pupil, the Overlord drains the power from him. Back in the village, Chuck looks in surprise as all the zombies around him suddenly stop. The lighting up of the scoreboard notified the guy that the user Peter Hendricks had died, but the fierce skill for the hero remains the same. Zombies all around begin to melt, and Chuck cannot understand what is happening, and suddenly a new urgent quest is activated. It is necessary to stop the transformation of the Queen within 5 hours, and the indicator of success is to deal damage to half of the infected land. From somewhere above, Chuck hears a familiar voice, and turning around, sees Kim floating in the sky, reporting a problem. Lowering to the ground, the professor told him about Iso's transformation into a monster. Before Kim can say that he has already sent Mon to Elder Park with this news, he is already here with them. When he learns that his granddaughter is now in the center of the purple earth, he breaks off and runs as fast as he can in the direction indicated. Rushing after him, Chuck asks Kim to inform the others and everyone to stay waiting in the house because it is very dangerous here. However, soon they both stop when they see a huge eye towering over the houses. After analyzing it, Chuck learns that this monster is the Queen's seed, and at the moment it is powering the pipes. Once fully mature, it will no longer be possible to return to human form. Now, in order to save Iso, Chuck and the Elder need to cut the pipes, and the guy throws himself at them with chains. However, his blows have almost no effect. The scoreboard states that the strength of the cocoon reaches 99.5%. Puck takes off. He asks Chuck to watch his movements carefully, since he can only do such a blow once. Since the cocoon is very the outside, the Elder decides to use his special blow, which defeats from the inside. The pipe that Park hits breaks, and the strength of the cocoon drops to 88.9%. Assuming that Chuck will have a hard time repeating this blow the first time, the Elder promises to show again once he recovers. However, the guy is sure that he will cope, because he managed to notice that the blow was very similar to the acoustician's skill. After activating the skill, Chuck jumps and strikes the next tube, and the strength of the cocoon drops to 74.3%. The cocoon loses its balance and several more tubes break, causing the strength to drop to 47.5%. The lit-up board says that their urgent quest has been completed, and one chance to proclaim the territory is given as a reward. The transformation of the Queen is unstable. A new urgent quest is announced. The Queen needs to be pacified. According to the plaque, the high-ranking opponent is angry with Chuck, and he should flee immediately. Realizing that the Elder can be caught at such a pace, the guy grabs him by the hand and runs as fast as he can. Upon reaching the safe zone, he throws Puck away from him and asks him to run away. Immediately after that, Chuck activates the agility skill, because Iso is already flying at him. After activating the prediction, the guy sees what blows the Queen is going to inflict on him. Dodging numerous blows, Chuck activates the fear skill. However, the enemy's rank is too high, and the effect of instilling fear is cancelled. Chuck swings and punches Iso in the stomach, but she doesn't even move. A fist seems to go through her. In response, the queen hits the guy so hard that he flies very far away and hits his back against a stone block. Iso gets closer to Chuck, and he, coming to his senses in time, activates the wooden structure skill. Instantly growing out of the ground, wooden planks surround the queen, giving the boy some time to escape. Chuck manages to run to the gate of the house where his friends are waiting for him, but Iso's tentacles are already trailing behind him. The tentacles almost catch up with the guy when he activates the proclamation of the territory and manages to jump into the safe zone. The scoreboard allows Chuck to choose fighters for the proclaimed territory, and the fewer fighters there are, the stronger the effect will be. The guy can't let Elder Park fight his granddaughter, so he chooses only himself as a fighter. Chuck asks everyone who is amazed by the power of his power to move away, as he is going to fight Iso, and they leave out the gate. Meanwhile, the queen breaks through the dome of the proclaimed territory with her tentacles, and Chuck activates all skills at once. The wooden structure, forming a giant leg, is about to descend on Iso, but she holds her in place with her tentacles. The queen manages to hold and break into splinters the wooden leg that crushes her. With his wings open, Chuck flies at her, throwing a giant wooden arm forward. Iso beats his hand away, and the guy directs Elder Puck's special blow at it, the chaotic dance of a ferocious tiger. The queen flies to the side and Chuck lands on the ground, believing that he managed to defeat her. However, Iso reappears in front of him, and after activating the analysis, the guy learns that her durability is 88%, and the queen will be pacified only after complete destruction. She attacks Chuck, but he activates divination and wooden structure and catches her leg with wooden vines. By throwing the queen off balance and slamming her into the ground with all his strength, the guy reduces the strength of the core to 77%. Getting back on his feet, Iso fights Chuck, moving very quickly. Park, who is watching from behind the gate, can no longer allow this to continue because everything can go wrong. With his God-given martial arts skills, the elder had become an arrogant master. He was so delusional about his abilities that he lived only for himself and did not know how to support others. While all the newspapers wrote about him, his weak son seemed to him nothing more than a disgrace. He left home when he was 20, leaving a note apologizing for being a son he couldn't rely on. Considering his son a loser, Park tore up the letter and decided to just move on. One day, two people came to the elder's house and informed him about a car accident in which Park's son and his wife had died. At the farewell ceremony, the elder heard those present talking about a poor girl who was left without parents. In the corner of the room sat a little girl who, noticing her grandfather and recognizing him from the photo, immediately rushed to him with tears in her eyes. Then Park realized that now he had a granddaughter, whom he had to take care of in his old age. The elder had a hard time, but it was then that he realized that there was something more valuable in his life than martial arts. Despite the lack of parental care, the girl grew up kinder than anyone. Puck asked John, if Iso comes to her senses, to tell her that her grandfather loves her very much. With all his power concentrated in his strong body, the elder is determined to do everything in his power, even if it costs him his life. Puck flies over the fence to help Chuck, who receives lightning strikes from the queen. Throwing Iso aside with a single blow, he unleashes an incredible wave of the most powerful energy of his martial art. Puck once again rushes to attack his mutated granddaughter, who is back on her feet. Fighting her, the elder invokes her memory, trying to remind her of who she used to be before turning into a monster. He asks Iso how she could have forgotten her principles, willpower, and lost her way, as she would never defeat him that way. The queen unleashes a huge, toothy monster on Puck, but this does not frighten the elder. He intends to destroy everything in his path. After destroying the monster, he is again left alone with Iso, and Chuck, who has managed to take a break, rushes to help him. However, the queen becomes even faster, and with 2 blows, she knocks Puck away from her, and then the hero. Everyone present is amazed at how strong Iso is, because she copes with even 2 strikers. Approaching Puck, she grabs him by the throat with one hand and lifts his huge body above her head. Panting from her tight grip, the elder says his granddaughter's name and strokes her cheek affectionately, tears streaming from the monster's eyes. The queen lets Park go, and falling to the ground, he realizes that this is his chance that cannot be missed. Having gained strength, the elder jumps up, calls for Chuck's help, and together they attack ISO. The quest is completed, the core is completely destroyed, the queen is pacified, and the defeated lies on the ground. Chuck is in a state of severe fatigue due to overuse of skills, and proclamation of the territory is deactivated. Falling to the ground exhausted, the last thing the guy sees in front of him is the equally exhausted body of Elder Puck. Coming to his senses in an unfamiliar room, Chuck receives a reward for the completed task. He can now choose 2 skills and combine them at will by activating skill synthesis. Monica enters the room. From her, he learns that she is in the second section of their new annex. Looking out the window, Chuck sees many houses built around him and learns that he has been unconscious for a month. Monica brings a doctor to the ward who respectfully calls the hero a leader. According to the doctor, the professor told him about how Chuck saved them all and founded the place where they are now. Checking the leader's condition, the doctor uses mana, which indicates that he is also awake. He is sure that if he continues treatment, then soon Chuck will be able to walk normally. The favor of the doctor, grateful for the rescue, has reached its limit, and now the guy can get his skill. The heal skill is transferred, thanks to which Chuck will be able to heal the target with mana. Chuck activates the synthesis of the heal and acoustic skills, resulting in the creation of a temporary skill called Healing Sound. Placing a radiant hand on his shoulder, Chuck feels the wounds on his body begin to heal rapidly. The guy briskly gets out of bed in front of the surprised professors of medicine. As the treatment is over, the doctor bows and leaves, leaving the leader alone with Monica. The girl offers to accompany Chuck so that he can see for himself how much everything has changed outside. They go out into the courtyard, and everyone who meets on their way happily bows their heads as a sign of gratitude to their leader. Everyone present, seeing Chuck, thanks him, and the guy embarrassedly asks Monica what she said to them. The girl says that people know the truth. He is their leader and savior. As it turned out, after Chuck lost consciousness, the purple earth disappeared. They managed to save many experts and help them awaken. When Professor Kim explored the area, he found traces of destroyed military units with catalysts scattered there. When asked what happened to Elder Park and ISO, Monica suggests that Chuck go to the first section and take a look. Entering the ward, the guy learns from the doctor that the Elder has seriously injured his back, and now it will be difficult for him to walk. ISO is fine, but so far she has not been able to recover, apparently due to a severe clouding of her mind. Monica asks Chuck to come over, takes his hand with one hand and puts the other on the girl's forehead. At first, everything around is illuminated with a bright light, and then it darkens, and the guy and the professor find themselves in some dark space. The soul healing skill is improving, and they can now enter ISO's consciousness. After activating the analysis, Chuck learns that the outer part of the barrier of the girl's consciousness is extremely desperate. Monica had tried to penetrate this dark shell before, but she had not been able to do it alone. According to the professor, when they break this ball, the consciousness will begin to collapse rapidly, so it must be saved before that. Chuck decides to activate skill synthesis by combining soul healing and fear, resulting in a new skill, mental impact. He manages to break through the shell on the first attempt, and climbing inside, he promises Monica to return soon. In ISO's inner world, Chuck sees a guy who yells at the girl that he died because of her. She fights off the ghosts, but they keep coming, and it seems as if there is no end to them. Everyone blames ISO for dying because they went after her, and she desperately tries to fight them off. She punches them, sure that the guys she knew couldn't say the same to her. Here she also sees Puck's ghost, accusing her of going to kill her grandfather for the second time. The girl continues to fight them, but the situation is constantly repeated over and over again. The ghosts persuade ISO to give up, as she must be tired by now, and it drives her crazy. She doesn't know how long she can hold on, and then Puck reappears, suggesting that she stop and go rest. He confidently insists that she herself knows that she will not be able to get out of here. Suddenly, a bright glow illuminates everything around, and Chuck appears nearby, suggesting that ISO get out of here. However, ghosts surround the girl. They want to prevent her from leaving them here and saving herself. After analyzing the ghosts, Chuck learns that they are ISO's trauma, and everything will repeat itself until she deals with it herself. Chuck tells the girl that she is not to blame, and with these thoughts she will offend her comrades because she should have remembered them differently. The boy activates the Soul Cure skill, and ISO, heading towards the ghosts, apologizes to them for the insults they caused. In the next moment, the girl swings with all her might and destroys the ghost standing in front of her. From somewhere above, her comrades suddenly turn to her in their former form. They are not at all offended by their master because they really enjoyed the time spent with her. Her friends promise to remain forever in her memory, and she is advised to go further on her way. The target overcame the injury and now thanks Chuck for saving him, but he believes that she saved herself. Heading for the brightly lit exit from the shell, the guy calls her with him to the outside world. Upon regaining consciousness, Iso jumps out of his bunk and tearfully rushes to his grandfather, blaming himself for his condition. Park opens his eyes and, smiling, calms his granddaughter, because if he hadn't saved her then, he would never have forgiven himself. Both burst into tears and snuggle together, full of joy and love. Monica asks Iso for a minute, and they go out onto the balcony to talk. The professor wants to tell the girl something about Chuck and hands her his notebook. Going out into the courtyard, Monica sits down on a bench with Chuck, who is sitting there alone. The guy decided to rest a little. After returning, people's faces began to seem much brighter to him. Chuck wonders if there have been any problems in the month of his absence. But thanks to the elders, everything has been going well. When asked if everything is enough, Monica replies that she also needs magic stones, because they can strengthen objects and awaken people. Chuck remembered Chuck talking about the ability of stones to amplify objects, and in this way she strengthened the generator for electricity. Since the guy was just about to look around, he gets up and promises to get as many catalysts as possible. Hearing that Chuck is about to go outside, Iso decides to go with him, ready to break zombie skulls. After asking Monica to provide them with a motorcycle, the guy and the granddaughter of the elder go to the village. When they encounter a crowd of zombies on the road, they realize that they will probably not be able to find survivors here. Iso asks to leave the destruction of monsters to her and boldly rushes into battle. One by one, the girl destroys the zombies, and Chuck watches from the sidelines, admiring how amazing she is. After defeating all the monsters, Iso picks up the stones, and the guy takes out an inventory from his pocket, which puts them all together. Ahead of them, they see a building that they decide to enter, and when they come closer, they see a sign on it. The inscription states the existence of a fairy tale paradise called the Shield in the South and encourages you to visit it for protection. It all started with justice. People's actor Lee Stevenson gathered people thanks to his power and connections. When he announced to the people that the shield would protect them, Chuck stood among the crowd, silently watching what was happening. Lee Stevenson kept his promise, and his men fought zombies, saving civilians. He declared the soldiers to be heroes, fighting for the lives of others, and demanded that they be highly valued. As a reward, he granted them first-class citizenship, and as a result, class inequality began to grow. Ordinary people worked for the military under their guns, overcoming fatigue and hunger. At the same time, they themselves, led by Stevenson, enjoyed all the benefits, seizing power and monopolizing all resources. Among other things, they engaged in experiments on humans, turning the shield into a trap from which it was impossible to escape. Professor Monica warns Iso that Chuck knows about the future and realizes that he is up to something. The guy informs her that they will need to hit the shield, but for now they must hunt properly. Together with the girl, they destroy another crowd of zombies and, having collected stones, return to their motorcycle. After analyzing the bike, Chuck decides to improve it and takes a catalytic converter in his hands, with the help of which the engine is strengthened and the noise of the engine is reduced. Using another stone, the guy upgrades the motorcycle to the next level, disguise. Now they can move on it unnoticed by everyone and therefore easily cross the guarded border of the shield. Upon entering the grounds, Chuck realizes that they have arrived just at the moment he saw then, a gathering in the square. SHIELD Director Kyle Harris honors the awakened who have dedicated their lives to saving humanity. He claims that the government and the army are incompetent, and the SHIELD will protect them and return everyone to their beautiful past. Chuck activates analysis and learns that Kyle is a mutant and a devourer of human magic stones. The headmaster encourages everyone to strive to get a qualification, thanks to which they can get to the village of SHIELD, or to Paradise, its center. When Iso asks what Chuck is going to do, he replies that it's not time to do anything yet. There are many civilians present, and besides, the guy knows nothing about the power of the awakened, and there are quite a few of them. He tells Iso that he saw those guys doing experiments by injecting ordinary lower-class people with zombie blood. Therefore, all they can do for now is to gather as much information as possible. In the forest, a special squad of the SHIELD fights with zombies. At the very moment when the soldiers think that this time the mission has failed, Chuck and Iso jump out from behind the trees. In front of the only surviving soldier, they cope with the monsters in one fell swoop. A frightened soldier asks who they are, and Chuck replies that they came here after seeing an announcement on the wall about the shield. A soldier enters Director Kyle's office to report to his superior about the failed operation. He regrets what happened, because the squad did not expect an attack by so many mutants. The soldier reveals that they were joined in the battle by two amazing Awakened who were able to kill the zombies. Kyle wondered if the Awakened were really so skilled. They didn't need to join the shield, and maybe they were up to something. Getting up from his chair, he adjusts his suit in order to meet the arrivals in person. Kyle sits down in the waiting room across from the boyfriend and girlfriend waiting for him and introduces himself to them. Two Avengers Squad commanders stand behind him, and Chuck activates analysis. According to the information received, all three are mutants and devourers of human magic stones. Kyle thinks he's seen a girl somewhere before, and Iso admits that she was once a master at the demonic martial arts school. The SHIELD director is impressed by what an amazing person has joined them and asks why they came here. Iso explains that she lost all of her comrades to the zombies and she doesn't want to lose anyone anymore. Chuck expresses his admiration for the activities of the SHIELD because they really do everything possible to save people. According to the guy, they came here to save more people and prevent losses. Kyle thinks that if they're telling the truth, they can be quite helpful. He invites the newcomers to join the Avengers Squad, and if they manage to collect achievements, they will be able to get to Paradise, the land of dreams. However, Chuck insists that they are not interested, and they only want to protect people. Kyle gives them a place in the 3rd Avengers Squad, all of which are outstanding Awakened. According to Chuck, judging by the reconnaissance team, they don't really need comrades because clumsy soldiers will only get in the way. One of the commanders thinks that the guy's words sound too arrogant, and he underestimates the strength of the SHIELD. Iso doesn't understand why the men are so angry at the truth, and the men are ready to fight them. Glancing menacingly at his subordinates, Harris smiles and promises to create a separate squad for the arrivals. Chuck and Iso thank him for his understanding and say goodbye as the commanders discuss their narcissism. Kyle orders them to calm down, and first he needs to check if the arrivals are really so skillful. The girl asks why Chuck refused Harris because they need to get to heaven. In the guy's opinion, it was less suspicious to behave like heroes of justice, because this is the fastest way to gain his trust. A trained squad of fighters comes out to meet them, demanding to prove that only 2 of them are enough for the squad. Iso apologizes for apparently making a mistake, and the commander chuckles, believing that they are backing their words. Smiling, the girl assures that the commander misunderstood everything because she alone is enough to cope with them. Enraged by the girl's audacity, the soldiers attack her, but the girl easily puts them all on the ground. Shaking the dust off her hands, she wonders how these weaklings were going to deal with Chuck at all, because he is much stronger than her. The fact that the commanders only sent their subordinates to fight shows them to be cowards, and Iso asks if they are going to fight. The commander, who has prepared for battle, looks definitely stronger than the girl thought. She was about to fight when Kyle's voice came from above, stopping them. He jumps off the roof to the ground in one fell swoop and, heading straight for the commander, slaps him in the face. Harris yells that such behavior is unacceptable towards those who agreed to help them. He orders to take the crippled guys and take them away from here, apologizing to the recruits. Chuck thinks he has nothing to apologize for, as Iso has already given everyone a good beating, and Kyle leaves. Back in his office, he ponders how the 2 can be useful to him if he can make good use of them. It's been a week since Chuck and Iso joined the SHIELD, where they've blended in perfectly with their abilities. While the girl taught ordinary people martial arts, the hero cooked food for them using the cooking skill and increasing the effect of stamina. Among those who came to lunch is a little girl staring at Chuck. After activating the analysis skill, the guy learns that this is 10-year-old Eve, a dreamer, a person without rank, but it seems to him that there is something else in her. The girl thanks Chuck for lunch, and having received the necessary level of favor from the expert, he acquires a skill from her. Thanks to the Magic Girl skill, the hero's dreams can become a reality when using mana. Commanders report to Kyle that in a week, the recruits have completely won the hearts of the people. They think that the main reason is that they gave them all the food they had. Kyle decides to check if they are really such heroes of justice, or if they are just words and they are up to something. Meeting with Chuck and Iso, Harris thanks them on behalf of the Avengers Squad for all their efforts on behalf of the survivors. Relying on the sincerity of their intentions, he asks the recruits for a favor. Kyle shows them where the thermal power plant is located, where terrifying monsters live. Every time the shield sent scouts there, they could not go there, and communication with them was cut off. In order to save more people, the organization needs to take over the station, and Kyle entrusts this to the recruits. Chuck happily accepts the task, and Harris thanks him for his fierce determination. After seeing the guy off with the girl, Kyle thinks that whatever the result, it won't make S.H.I.E.L.D. any worse. And while the recruits are doing this, Harris is going to attack that huge hospital as he planned. Getting on a motorcycle, Chuck and ISO go to the power plant, where many people are rumored to have been beaten to death. Arriving there, they are attacked by zombies that have evolved into ghouls. Swinging his chain at them, Chuck discovers that the ghouls are using electricity. Unable to withstand the voltage, ISO collapses and, enraged, decides to use his new skill. He activates the Magic Girl skill and uses it to confuse his opponents. As a wish, Chuck asks to activate the ability to be resistant to electricity. After gaining this ability, he furiously begins to crush mutants one by one. The boyfriend asks ISO to do the same move as him to transform, and she gets into a funny pose. However, the girl does not succeed, and Chuck admits with a laugh that he was joking, because only he has this skill. The girl is angry with him and demands that he forget everything he has just seen, while Chuck gives her resistance to electricity. He hands her a drink that boosts her stamina and concentration by 10% for 1 hour. Having regained energy, they move on, ready to rush into the fight with ghouls again. Entering the power plant, a pack of mutants again appears in front of them, ready to attack them. After activating electrocute resistance, Chuck and ISO charge into battle. After destroying them as well, ISO suddenly has an idea, and she asks the hero if he can conjure something else with this wand. But Chuck has already tested the effect of magic. Besides, it states that you can use only one for each transformation. The girl finds it strange that none of the scout team survived, because although ghouls are strong, they can still be defeated. Since this place is an important infrastructure, Chuck assumes that there is definitely someone stronger here. The guy turned out to be right, because immediately a mutant of huge size appears from behind the pipe. The monster begins to attack, spewing an electrically charged ball from its toothy mouth. Chuck activates the wooden structure skill, and a tall wooden shield is erected in front of the heroes, protecting them from the charge. The guy laughs at ISO, whose hair stands on end from the current. The girl is beside herself with anger. She wants to deal with the ghoul as soon as possible, and she and Chuck go on the offensive. The guy activates the mana dragon of blue flames and grabs the monster by the neck with chains. Meanwhile, ISO, jumping, begins to hit the ghoul in the head. Monsters continue to attack the heroes, but they cope with all of them. Watching the fight, the Shield Scout cannot believe what he has seen. He relays information to HQ about how Squad 3 defeated the Omega together and successfully captured the power plant. Harris is surprised at how quickly the recruits completed the task. Now he is sure that if their power is used correctly, then promotion to Deputy Commander will no longer be just a dream. Approaching the scout, Chuck and ISO wonder if he is done with the report. The soldier is frightened. He did not expect to be discovered so quickly because he was well hiding. Chuck assumed that Kyle would send someone else here, if only for the sake of surveillance. However, he is embarrassed by the distrust shown towards the third squad, but the soldier claims that he followed them on the sly, just so as not to interfere. According to Chuck, if this was the intentions of the soldier, then he is calm and suggests that he have lunch together. The scout is impressed by the dinner prepared by the soldier and considers the fight of the recruits simply amazing. Reflecting on the scout's report, Harris can't believe that the skills shown on the mission by the third squad are all they are capable of. Since the takeover of the power plant was successful, now Kyle can deal with a more important issue for him, the attack on the hospital. According to the signalers, an hour ago, 2 detachments entered inside, but communication with them may be interrupted due to an unstable network. But since everything is going smoothly at the moment, Harris has every chance of hitting the jackpot and becoming the right hand of the S.H.I.E.L.D. director. He orders the signalers to tell the squad not to overdo it and attack step by step. Patrick Hudson, the leader of the first squad, which is on a mission to capture the hospital, demands to report the situation to the second squad. The last time the second squad got in touch was half an hour ago, reporting that they were entering the 11th floor. Suddenly, from above, already from the 13th floor, the second squad reports the fierce resistance of the enemy and advises the first squad to retreat. However, the commander orders to direct all forces to break through to the top. Going up to the top floor, the first squad finds itself in pitch darkness, and suddenly a call for help is heard from somewhere behind the door. Rushing to the sound of a voice belonging to the leader of the second squad, They find him kneeling on the conference room stage. Shining the beams of a flashlight in his direction, the soldiers are horrified to see the commander in front of them, half of whose face has mutated and pipes are coming up from his head. These tubes begin to seize all the members of the squad one by one, not reacting to the shots from their machine guns. Assuming his usual monster form, Hudson tries to defend himself with all his strength, striking his former comrade. The base is trying to contact the squads, but so far this has not been possible because there is very poor communication on the upper floors of the hospital. Suddenly, someone gets in touch and reports a problem with a request to send more awakened people. Kyle can't believe that his strongest commanders can't do it alone. He promises to send reinforcements as soon as possible, and at the other end, with a sinister smile, Harris is thanked by the commander of the first squad. The scout thanks the recruits for the treat, and at that moment, a message is heard from the radio about a problem with the operation in the hospital. Signalers announce the difficult situation and request the support of the 3rd Detachment on the direct instructions of the director. And now, just a couple of minutes later, Chuck and ISO, accompanied by a scout, rush towards the hospital. When they reach their destination, they see the corpses of zombies just before entering the building. Chuck finds it strange that the commander of the first squad has requested the arrival of the still awakened ones, and he asks to be connected with Harris. The guy asks Kyle if the remaining awakened shields reach at least 10% of the power already sent on the mission. According to Harris, most of the strength of the units were commanders. In this case, Chuck does not understand why the commander needed to call for help from the weak awakened who are unable to help. According to Kyle, the situation is so difficult that even an ordinary cat would come in handy as a help. But if the matter was really urgent, Chuck, in the place of the commander, should have asked for a 3rd squad, and not the usual awakened ones. In this case, the situation is similar to the fact that the commander is not asking for help, but for booty for himself. Harris finally understands Chuck's suspicions. Both commanders have been defeated and sent a false request to lure more people into a trap. The way a monster can imitate a person does not seem strange to the guy, because every time new zombies appear in the world. Chuck declares his willingness to go up to the building, but warns Kyle to be prepared for the worst. The scout refuses to go with the 3rd squad, assuming that he does not belong there at all and he will not be able to be useful. Chuck asks him to allow him to take a walkie-talkie with him to keep in touch with headquarters. Entering the hospital and seeing mountains of corpses, the guy decides to give ISO the opportunity to improve her skills so that she does not get hurt. Finding an orange catalytic converter on the floor, he hands it to the girl. Using the stone, ISO feels a great power in his body and thanks Chuck for it. Climbing the stairs, the heroes come across zombies descending to meet them. The girl asks to be allowed to deal with the monsters herself and boldly rushes into battle. After dealing with the opponents, the heroes get to the 13th floor, specified in the request of the headquarters. As they open the door, they hear pleas for help, but Chuck is sure it's a trap. After all, if you don't want to die from zombie bites, you won't scream so loudly just to call for help. With this in mind, Chuck is going to go first and ISO will follow him. If it's a trap, the girl suggests not going inside, but demolishing the entire building. However, Chuck has a better idea for this, and the guy turns to the commander, asking if it's him. The commander asks for help again. According to him, he injured his leg, and the guy in the meantime activates the transformation skill. After confusing his opponent, Chuck asks the wand for magic, which is highly flammable. After activating the oil shock, the guy showers the enemy with flammable slurry. Before the mutant can jump in their direction, Chuck shields himself and ISO with a wooden structure, setting the monster on fire as if in a furnace. While the burned zombies break out, the guy activates skill synthesis and combines soul healing and fear. ISO and Chuck charge to attack and destroy both former commanders. When the fire subsides, the heroes find a catalyst that fell out of the mutant's main body. Now they need to be careful, because in addition to monsters that imitate the human voice, there may be those that copy the appearance. Shouldering the huge bodies, Chuck and ISO carry them out of the building, where the SHIELD soldiers are already waiting for them. Harris didn't expect the hospital to have a monster capable of controlling people. He thanks the recruits because, without them, the offensive squad would always roam the area in the form of monsters. Kyle promises to never forget their kindness and asks them to wait a while, as he needs to report what happened to his superiors. It seems to the girl that Harris's attitude towards them has changed a little, and Chuck considers it natural because he lost all his useful guys in a day. According to the guy, now Kyle is desperately looking for a solution, which he and ISO can become. It would be ideal for them if Harris filled the power gap with them. Perhaps right now he is furiously promoting them in front of his superiors, and this in turn will allow them to get to heaven. Upon returning, Kyle reveals that he has reported the success of the recruits to his superiors, although they do not like it when their courage is flaunted. The commander expressed a desire to meet with Chuck and Iso, but now he is busy, so in 2 to 3 days a car from Paradise will come for them. When the girl asks if people live well in Paradise, Harris replies that now everything is not going as smoothly as before the disaster. Although he is sure of one thing, there is no place in the Republic that could restore the shelter as quickly as Rye did. Since there is not much time left before meeting Lee Stevenson, Chuck decides to prepare just in case. Taking an orange catalyst from the inventory, the guy improves his transfer skill. Mana has increased significantly, thanks to which Chuck's skeleton has been optimized for combat, and now Iso seems smaller to him than before. The sign says that now the hero can increase the level of skills by completing quests. Chuck looks at Iso, and the scoreboard suggests that he get a quest from a divine demonic martial arts skill expert. The quest, called Competitive Spirit, involves fighting Iso with your bare hands until she is 100% satisfied. The girl starts attacking, and Chuck is surprised at how strong her punches are, but he still manages to block them. The fight ends with 20% satisfaction with the target. The scoreboard advises you to repeat the fight later to complete the quest. The soldiers passing by them who saw the duel and how Chuck grabbed Iso's hands began to giggle at them. In the morning, rumors that they hugged reached the hero himself. Running up to the soldiers, Iso begins to shout that they misunderstood everything because he and Chuck did nothing shameful. Frightened by the girl's anger, the soldiers bow and apologize, promising to be more careful in their conversations from now on. Iso talks about the duel and his defeat and asks the soldiers not to talk about it. Hearing all this and the girl's dissatisfaction with the rumors, Chuck asks her not to take all this into her head and, turning around, leaves. The guy has a new plan, and together with Iso, he goes after Eva and takes the girl to the garden to carry out his plan. The baby tells Chuck about her favorite heroine, the magic girl, who can fly and defeat villains with a wave of a magic wand. The guy promises Eva to read the book and in return offers to take a magic red stone. Chuck suggests that she say the word awakening while holding a stone in her hand and turn into a magic girl. Taking the catalyst in her hands, Eva awakens and then transforms into the sorceress Ginny, the heroine of justice. The baby demonstrates her new abilities to the heroes and, riding a magic wand, soars into the air. As it turned out, in addition to this, Eva can lift other people into the air. According to the girl, she has 4 more spells, which surprises Chuck. Suddenly, a mutant steroid appears from behind the trees, who apparently noticed the flying Eva and came for her. The girl rushes forward to show everyone her magical power. With a wave of her wand, she summons the power of Mudstone, and a revived block of stone resembling a golem rises from the ground. The steroid rushes at her, and they begin to fight each other fiercely. According to Eva, the block of stone is not magic, but her friend Argalite. Waving her wand again, she activates Stone Skin and Haste skills. Perfected, Argalite lunges at Steroid and defeats him. After thanking him for his help, Eva escorts the stone back underground. At the site of the zombie destruction, the girl finds a catalyst, and Chuck offers her to keep it. The baby thanks the guy, and now he is calm. Because with such skills, it will not be difficult for the girl to stand up for herself. A car came to pick up Chuck and Iso to take the recruits and Harris to Paradise to the commander. Paradise is a city with tall skyscrapers, where residents calmly walk along the streets. Entering the central headquarters, the 3 of them go into the office, where Commander Stevenson is already waiting for them. Patting Harris on the shoulder, he compliments him on his hard work. After activating the analysis skill, Chuck learns that Lee is a D-rank human, a dominator and devourer of human magic stones. It follows that Stevenson has skills, and since he is a dominator, now the hero sees the meaning in his actions. Lee had always been more successful defensively than offensively, and Chuck wondered why he was expanding his territory so much. After all, if he had combat skills, then he would not act like this. So, it is either a matter of dominating people or benefiting from the expansion of territories. Harris introduces Chuck and Iso to Stevenson, highlighting the help they provided to the SHIELD in the fight against the mutants. The SHIELD soldier makes sure that the loaders carefully stack the boxes into the back of the car, and suddenly notices their frightened look. Turning around, he sees a huge mutant snake crawling right up to his back. The snake rushes at the truck with one jerk and bites it into 2 parts. She then sucks her tongue on the soldier, and he points her to where the survivors' camp is. Spitting the man and raising his head to the sky, the monster emits an ultrasonic wave, at the sound of which a crowd of mutants pulls up. After finishing the conversation, during which Stevenson received a lot of pleasure, he sees off the recruits, making them promise to come to paradise again. Harris thinks about how Chuck managed to gain the trust of a commander who doesn't usually get so close to humans. Stevenson gets in the car and drives away, and Chuck congratulates Harris on his promotion. The guy is presented as a gift personally from the commander with a whole box of magic stones, which he plans to distribute to the residents. Chuck promises to take good care of the catalysts, and Harris expresses hope for fruitful cooperation. So, the first step has been taken, and now getting closer to Kyle, the hero plans to get even more skills he needs. Suddenly, a breathless soldier runs up to them and reports to Harris about the emergency. According to him, information was received about a huge wave of zombies approaching the suburban settlement. Hearing this, Chuck asks Harris to provide him with the fastest motorcycle, and they set off to help. Barricades have been set up at the gates of the settlement, where monsters are reportedly already approaching, and the army is at the ready. The commander regrets that all this is happening when the third squad has left. He is afraid of not being able to stand up to the creatures they have never seen before. Watching from around the corner, Eva sees that there is no Chuck among the soldiers who could help them. Suddenly, the girl rushes to the men, wanting to help them fight. The commander is angry at the soldiers for not evacuating the villagers from the settlement. Eva asks the commander to let her help them, as she is also awakened and has skills. The soldiers look in horror at the approaching crowd of zombies, led by a 5-headed serpent that is longer than the height of the buildings. The commander orders selfless defense until the third detachment arrives, called for reinforcements. The monsters are already very close. The soldiers are preparing their weapons for the attack, and at this moment, everything around is illuminated by a bright glow. Turning to the light, the men see a girl floating in the air, holding a magic wand high above her head. The commander gives the order to open fire, and the soldiers fire a burst of automatic fire at the kite. All of them are very scared, as bullets do not penetrate the monster's thick skin at all. However, Eve comes to their aid, who launches a bright purple beam towards the kite, scorching it. The commander orders the soldiers not to lose hope, because now a fearless, awakened girl is fighting them. The monsters are very close, and Eve calls her friend Argalite to help. The girl appeals to the morale of the soldiers, convincing them that now they can do it, and everyone gets ready for battle. The commander is also confident that with such magic they will be able to survive, and everyone rushes into battle. Despite the strong defenses of the Mudston, the soldiers scatter in different directions as the monsters grow stronger. The huge mouth of the serpent is already very close to Eve. The girl closes her eyes in fear because she has absolutely no mana left. However, when she opens her eyes, she sees that Chuck and Iso have joined them, covering her with their backs and ready to hold the line. The heroes clarify whether everything is okay with the girl, and she begins to cry out of fear. Chuck comforts her, because with her bravery, Eva managed to save many lives, and now she needs to rest and entrust this task to them. Assessing the toothy enemy approaching them, the heroes rush into battle. Chuck and Iso inflict many blows on the snake, and it suddenly freezes, as if something is about to happen. The mutant suddenly explodes, and parts of its body fly at the zombies below. Sprinkled with the blood of the serpent, the living dead rush towards their opponents at extraordinary speed. The commander orders to help the third squad and go on a large-scale offensive. Soldiers shoot at zombies, but their bullets are of no use at all. They fly away from them, just like from a kite. However, Chuck and Iso deal with the attackers effortlessly. The commander had heard before that these two were much stronger than the deputy, and now he was finally convinced of this. Suddenly, the pretty battered serpent rises again, but instead of attacking, this time it flees. Making sure that they have already figured everything out here, the heroes rush in pursuit of him. Harris is driving 2 truckloads of soldiers to help the settlement defend itself. Knowing what monsters they will face, he hopes that the third squad can hold out until they arrive. Driving up to the destroyed barricades, Kyle orders everyone to prepare for battle. However, when the commander-in-chief gets out of the vehicle, the commander reports to him that the zombies have been completely destroyed. Harris is also informed of the escape of the mutant serpent and how the third squad gave chase to him. At that moment, an explosion is heard behind the building opposite, and Kyle orders the commander to leave the recovery on him and go to help. However, before they can move, Chuck and Iso are already approaching them. The third squad does not need help because they have already dealt with the kite themselves. As evidence, he shows Harris a special yellow magic stone extracted from the monster's head. And although the squad that arrived in time has no one to fight with, Chuck asks them to help him restore the destroyed school. The guards standing at the post notice that the Molotov gang is moving in their direction. They urgently call the commander-in-chief on the radio with a request to send reinforcements. At the head of a moving convoy of cars rides gang boss Kirk DePaul, who seeks revenge for his brethren. He is sure that neither an armed army nor a strong gate can become an obstacle in his way. The soldiers immediately open fire on the gang moving towards them. Kirk activates the vehicle change skill, and his truck transforms into a robot that echoes the leader's movements. Meanwhile, at the entrance to the settlement, the destroyed walls are being reconstructed. Noticing how hard it is for people to carry stones in bags, Eva waves her magic wand. Everyone around suddenly feels an incredible surge of strength and energy, thanks to which the reconstruction is significantly accelerated. Approaching the girl, Harris thanks her for her help, and Eva admits that she will do everything possible because Chuck asked her about it. Kayla wonders if the baby was always awake and learns that it happened to her thanks to Chuck. Harris finds it strange that the guy seems to feel that this particular girl needs to be awakened. Kyle pats Eva on the head, but she pulls away from him, stating that only Mr. Chuck can do this. Harris is amazed by the impressive strength and popularity among people that the guy has. However, the fact that Chuck can recognize awakened people with special skills is something Kyle decides to keep a secret. A signal man runs to Harris as fast as he can to inform the commander-in-chief about the attack of the Hammer Gang on Paradise. ISO asks who he is talking about, and Chuck tells her about the popular organization from his nightmares. The girl is interested in whether they are as bad as the Shield, and she whispers to the hero about it. According to Chuck, they were rather famous for their madness and extreme cruelty. For the first time, the guy saw Kirk DePaul and his gang in his 44th nightmare. In it, Chuck fought zombies chasing a crowd of residents he was trying to save along the road. Suddenly, the cars of the Hammer Gang rushed in their direction at high speed, and people began to ask for help with hope. However, the machines began to crush everyone indiscriminately, both zombies and people, and stopped only when they crushed everyone. Miraculously alive, Chuck could not believe the way the members of the Hammer treated the people. Kirk, who came out to him, did not see any problem in this, because among the survivors there could be already bitten. He had no intention of endangering his team, so he demanded that Chuck shut his mouth and not interfere. Harris, who runs up to the third squad, informs them of the attack on Paradise and the need to return there as soon as possible. The heroes decide to go there first on a motorcycle without waiting for the others. They reach Paradise by activating disguise mode and watch from the sidelines, trying to assess the situation. Lee Stevenson went on the defensive and now stands directly opposite Kirk in his transformer. Holding a long hilt with a tip tied to it, he activates the rule skill, soaring into the air. Thanks to this ability, Lee is able to use manpower to his advantage. Chuck analyzes a transformer and learns that he is looking at a modified big arm machine enhanced with magic stones. It is controlled by the leader of the gang, Hammer Kirk DePaul, an E-rank man, an auto mechanic. Judging by his words to Stevenson, Kirk intends to kill him at all costs in order to avenge his brethren. They begin to fight, Lee deflecting the fire DePaul throws at him, activating the board with a 30-man power. However, at some point, Kirk realizes that a power much greater than the one that Stevenson possesses is directed against him. As the fire subsides, DePaul sees that a boy and a girl have joined his opponent in front of him. Very little time passed, and now all the members of the Hammer Gang are sitting, tied up, on the ground. Stevenson thanks the heroes for their help because they managed to catch the terrorists without suffering many casualties. Since the expert's favor in the person of Lee has reached the required level, Chuck can receive the rule skill from him. The skill transfer is activated, and now the guy can use living power. That is, the power that strengthens his body and uses mana in the process. Stevenson approaches Kirk and asks if he and his team are going to join the Shield. DePaul is infuriated by the proposal and asks Lee to stop talking and just kill him. However, Stevenson has a different proposal. In this case, he will kill not only Kirk, but also all members of the Hammer Gang. Chuck asks the commander what is going on between the two groups. According to Lee, the members of the Shield invaded the gang's territory. A battle broke out between them, and as a result, both sides had casualties. From then until now, there have been too many victims, and Stevenson can't leave it like this. So he decides to carry out the execution. Chuck notes that many of the gang have good skills, and this could be a big loss. Stevenson understands that the guy may be right, but he doesn't know how to convince DePaul to join forces. After all, Kirk refuses to do this even despite Lee's threats to kill his entire family, and the commander is going to do just that. Chuck is thinking about how to prevent this from happening because this organization could be used to their advantage. The guy offers Stevenson to give Kirk 3 days, during which he will try to change his mind. Lee likes Chuck's enthusiasm and, after a little thought, agrees to give him 3 days. The bound members of the gang are taken to a prisoner of war camp. Stevenson bids farewell to the heroes and leaves the field as well. Left alone with ISO, Chuck decides to try out his new skill and activates the board. Despite the very high mana consumption, the power in the guy's hands becomes so powerful that when he hits the ground with his hand, he splits it in two. Chuck understands that if this is what a living force can do, then Lee Stevenson is much stronger than he imagined. The guy asks ISO to get ready. Now they will go to the base of the Hammer Gang together. There is a good chance that Kirk DePaul's granddaughter is awakened with skill, and Chuck hopes that this fact can change everything. In his 43rd nightmare, the hero sneaked up on the Hammer Gang to try to hear and understand them. As it turned out, the gang was called so because Kirk worked in the workshop of the same name. DePaul showed Chuck a photo of him standing with his granddaughter, Sarah, in front of the studio. According to him, the girl was very smart, and if it were not for the situation, she would have been able to achieve a lot. Just during this conversation, Sarah herself came up to them, unhappy that her grandfather was drunk again. Knowing that the girl is Kirk's weakness, Chuck came to meet her. Seeing strangers, Sarah drops the canister from her hands out of surprise and asks them who they are. Mentioning her grandfather's name, the guy says that he needs to tell her about something and asks to give him time. Going to Sarah's office, Chuck and ISO tell her that Kirk and his workers have been captured. To prevent their execution, the heroes need the girl's help. However, according to Sarah, even if they take her hostage, it will not help to change her grandfather's mind. Chuck has another idea about this, and he hands the girl a catalyst. Sarah knows that even if she tries to awaken, it's not a given that she will have a skill, especially one that can prevent execution. However, Chuck has a good feeling about this, and he believes that her skill will be useful. Sarah agrees, takes the stone in her hands, and receives the unique skill mediator. This skill helps performers to negotiate, as well as to establish certain conditions. Sarah decides to try the skill, and she and Chuck act as contracting parties. According to the contract, Chuck should not lie to her, and if it was true, then the girl would work for him for a month, and if it was a lie, then Chuck and ISO would immediately return to heaven. The parties come to an agreement, and since what was said was true, Sarah becomes Chuck's subordinate for a month, during which he can give her simple commands. With the help of this agreement, it will not be difficult for the guy to negotiate with Kirk. Sarah hopes that she and Chuck will work together because now she finally feels better. The guy wants her to go with them to heaven for the sake of the Hammer Gang. The door to Kirk's cell opens, and the soldiers inform him of an upcoming 30-minute meeting with the leader of the third squad. Following the guards, Chuck, ISO, and a confused Sarah appear on the doorstep. DePaul thinks his granddaughter has also been taken hostage, but that, he says, will not affect his decision in any way. Chuck explains to him that Sarah is not hostage and has come here to try to change his mind. The girl confesses to her grandfather that she is now awakened too, and activates the mediator skill. For 30 minutes, Chuck will only tell Kirk the truth, and if it's a lie, the guy will yawn twice. The guy asks the leader of the Hammer to listen to him carefully once he accepts the terms of the treaty. DePaul has nothing to lose and accepts the terms, ready to listen to what the leader of the third squad has to say. The man is sure that in any case, nothing will be able to convince him. However, coming close to him, Chuck admits that he wants to destroy the shield. Since he and Kirk have common goals, the guy suggests that DePaul join forces. The leader of the Hammer can't believe what he's heard, but Sarah reminds him that if Chuck was lying, it would be shown. The guy plans to catch Lee Stevenson, and to do so, he needs Kirk to bow his head briefly to the leader of the shield. DePaul is already aware of the incredible strength of the guy in front of him, but he knows that Stevenson is much stronger than him. Kirk only managed to survive thanks to the sacrifices of his comrades, and in the last battle, Lee did not show even half of his strength. Therefore, DePaul cannot even imagine how Chuck plans to catch the commander-in-chief. To the surprise of everyone present, the guy admits that he knows the future. After all, he had awakened Sarah precisely because he knew of the potential she possessed. The girl understands that he is telling the truth, because if it were a lie, Chuck would yawn twice. After hearing all this, Kirk realizes that he needs to agree to the offer, and from now on, he declares Chuck his new brother. As the favor of the experts has reached its limit, the hero receives the skills Change Transport and Mediator from DePaul and his granddaughter. Chuck arrived at the commander-in-chief to inform him that he had managed to convince Kirk and that he agreed to all the terms. Stevenson understands that the leader of the third squad is not only strong, but also very useful. He praises the guy for a job well done, which made him one less problem. Lee invites Chuck to sit down and asks why he wants to save others, and Chuck replies that it will make it easier for him to deal with everything. The next question is what a guy would do if he had to sacrifice one to save 10. Chuck realizes that this is a kind of test and replies that he would sacrifice one. Stevenson suddenly starts laughing and asks if the guy has ever heard of the difficulties of actors. Those who are good at acting usually live with 3 or 4 mental disorders, and Lee admits that he is the same. Now, it seems to him that the guy sitting in front of him is the same, because a normal person would not give such a direct answer. According to Chuck, if you want to save a lot of people, then you have to become a villain. Stevenson laughs at what he said, and then says that in 3 days the guy will need to go to the same place with him. Chuck asks to be allowed to take his deputy Ezo with him, and Lee agrees. 3 days later, the heroes are still training, and the quest to win the girl's heart is finally completed. Chuck gains a new level of the ability to master the divine demonic martial art. Approaching them, one of the SHIELD soldiers informs them that the commander-in-chief is looking for them. Arriving at the expected Stevenson, Chuck and Iso get into the car with him and go somewhere. When they reach a tunnel, the 3 of them get out of the car and enter it. Stopping near an old rusty door, Lee promises to show the heroes the hope of humanity. Passing through an unsightly door in the tunnel, they see another one in front of them. A new and strong, guarded door, the entrance to which is strictly forbidden to outsiders. The door opens, and Chuck and Iso see a secret laboratory with many scientists, where the bodies and organs of zombies are stored in huge glass flasks. Stevenson invites the heroes to come in and familiarize themselves with the research laboratory of the Awakened. According to Lee, they study zombies to prepare for what may happen in the future. Reaching the end of the laboratory, the 3 of them find themselves in front of the strongest door with many bolts. Stevenson presses a button that, recognizing his fingerprint, opens the door for him. Behind her in the office is a man in a white coat, whom Chuck immediately recognizes. This is the director of the Research Institute, Steve Hancock, one of those who appear on the list of killers compiled by Chuck. Stevenson introduces the professor to the new SHIELD heroes he told him about during the last meeting. Steve expresses his joy at meeting the guy, and in the meantime he activates the Analyze skill. According to the information received, Hancock is a mad scientist, a rank Yi person. Chuck suggests that it was this professor who created the creature they encountered in the hospital. The guy with a smile tells him how pleased he is to meet Steve and introduces him to his comrade, Iso. Stevenson plans to show the heroes a new human race today, and Hancock is worried about whether everything will be okay. The commander-in-chief is sure that these 2 can be trusted and there is nothing to worry about. The professor presses the buttons of the touch panel, and a metal box opens in front of those present. Now the heroes see 2 large muscular bodies of red color lying under glass. Chuck analyzes the bodies and learns that there are mixed creatures in front of them, mutant people. According to Stevenson, these people are his brothers and sisters, volunteers for his project for a new human race. Lee thinks it's surprising that the power of mutants and human intelligence can be combined. The participants in the experiment voluntarily agreed to be injected with the blood of mutants. However, Chuck is amazed at how exactly Stevenson managed to turn this crazy project into reality. After all, in his dreams, the guy saw how the bodies of the test subjects rejected the blood of the mutants, and swelling were torn to pieces. According to Hancock, strong survivability was needed to overcome rejection, but it cannot be increased at will. It was then that the solution to this problem appeared. The route which Lee shows to the characters who do not understand anything. Chuck activates analysis but learns nothing other than that there is a cage in front of him. According to Stevenson, the root is a miracle that can save many thanks to the sacrifices of some. Hancock presses a button and a hatch opens, revealing the man they are about to feed to Root. In response to Iso's bewilderment, the professor asks not to feel sorry for this man, since he is a criminal and a murderer and deserves to die. The monster opens its toothy mouth and the heroes watch as it eats its victim in just a few seconds. After finishing with the food, Root opens its mouth and a golden ball rolls out of it, according to Chuck's analysis. Monster excrement. Hancock explains that this is the stone of life, which increases its survivability and becomes even larger than that of zombies. In addition, the stone significantly reduces the degree of rejection of the blood of mutants. The duration of the possible action of the new human race with the preservation of reason will only increase. According to Chuck, the Shield needs to hide all this well, because if rumors spread, it will be troublesome to deal with everything. Stevenson pats him on the shoulder. According to him, he had no doubt that the guy would understand everything. The professor also rejoices at how the number of their reliable comrades is growing and hopes for fruitful cooperation with them. As the expert's favor has reached the necessary level for transmission, Chuck receives the skill from Hancock. The biotechnology ability allows cells to be transplanted and transferred into bodies using mana. When Chuck asks if the Life Stone has any side effects, Lee reveals that there are none, and he himself has been taking it for a long time. In the future, Stevenson promises to provide them to him and ISO so that they can use him to sustain their hearts. In the meantime, he hands Chuck the stone he just received so that the guy can check it. The hero understands that Stevenson needs to be dealt with as soon as possible because the further it goes, the more difficult it will be to destroy him. Lee wants to demonstrate the power of the new human race to the heroes and opens glass cases with mutant people. When they wake up, they talk to the commander-in-chief, and since there is progress in research, he promises them to be released soon. Taking advantage of Lee's distraction, Chuck activates several skills at once: Blue Flame Dragon, Acoustics, Fear, and 10-Man Rule. Without another moment's hesitation, he delivers a powerful blow to Stevenson's head and blows it to small pieces. The body of the commander-in-chief falls to the floor, pouring blood on the stunned mutant people. Professor Hancock is about to escape, but is unable to do so as ISO catches up to him and blows his head off. By activating Synthesis, Chuck combines soul healing with fear and directs it at human mutants. Running up to them, ISO snaps both of their necks in one fell swoop, and they fall to the floor after Lee and the professor. Chuck praises the girl for how well she lasted and asks if she managed to record the conversation. The recording is made, and the heroes take more photos to show the survivors the information received. Just as they are about to check en route, they hear a sound behind them and turn around to see Lee getting back on his feet. Instead of stumping a human head, a new monster head begins to grow from his neck. Stevenson is beside himself with anger. He cannot believe that Chuck betrayed him and wants to know the reason. It is not difficult for the guy to answer this question, because he considers Lee disgusting and greedy. Twisting his chain, he prepares to attack, knowing how long this fight can last, because Stevenson activates the rule skill for 100 people. By activating Analysis, Chuck manages to dodge Lee's attack and be the first to strike. ISO also attacks the commander, who has lost his balance. However, the enemy with his body torn to shreds is still confidently on his feet, striking the heroes with his strength. Lee admits that he has more than one or even two skills, and he is going to kill Chuck in the most painful way possible. After fully recovering and changing his appearance, Stevenson punches ISO hard. Dozens of tentacles crawl out of his shoulders, with which he stretches towards Chuck, and the guy barely manages to block his quick blows. At the sound of the fight, armed soldiers enter the laboratory, suspecting that the commander-in-chief needs their help. However, he pounces on them and kills them one by one so quickly that they don't have time to realize what happened. Tearing soldiers apart, it devours them and becomes even larger and stronger. The survivors start shooting at the monster and suddenly notice that it has disappeared, leaving only smoke behind. Immediately, the mutant appears behind their backs and, grabbing the soldiers by the throat with his hands, lifts them above his head and strangles them, breaking their necks. Watching this, Chuck realizes that the enemy is damn strong and synthesizes two skills: Analysis and Biotechnology. Thanks to this, a new skill is formed: Imitation, which must be strengthened with a magic stone. Chuck can now analyze the target's body and copy their skills, and at this stage, the analysis rate is 11%. The guy's muscles begin to grow at a tremendous speed, causing him severe pain. At the prompt of the tablet, the analysis process can be sped up with a sample, and Chuck glances at the torn pieces of Lee's body. Taking a piece of flesh in his hands with disgust, the guy notices that the level of analysis immediately rises to 21%. Therefore, he begins to quickly grab pieces from the floor, further accelerating the launch process of imitation. After finishing repairing his body by devouring the corpses of his own soldiers, Stevenson heads towards Chuck. He attacks him with confidence in an imminent victory, but to his surprise, the guy inflicts such powerful blows on him that his body is literally torn to pieces. The monster is amused by Chuck's arrogance. This time, he decides to fight him with all his might and activates the 500 human board. His body mutates even more, and now it is absolutely impossible to recognize the old Stevenson in him. Since there have been great changes in the body that Chuck imitates, a second analysis is activated, the level of which is still only 13%. The pain in the guy's body increases. He can only guess how much stronger his opponent can become. The monster rushes at Chuck, hits him, blood spurts out of the guy's mouth, and he falls backwards to the floor. Mutant lifts him by the neck, anticipating a slow and painful death for the traitor. However, he is attacked from behind by an awakened Iso, who fears that Chuck is about to stop breathing. The girl manages to distract the monster, and he throws his victim aside, switching to her. Iso picks up Chuck on the fly and lays him on the floor, promising to try to buy him some more time. The girl with the mutant has too much difference in strength and speed, and so she decides to use his weaknesses in the fight against him. By observing the martial art of an expert in battle, Chuck increases the level of mastery of this skill. The guy is amazed at how Iso fights with someone who wields the power of 500 people. The girl hits Lee hard, and pieces of his flesh fly towards Chuck again, which he immediately uses to imitate. Standing on his feet and stretching out his hand to the mutant, the guy tears off one of his eyes from his body, and now his body is strengthening at an incredible speed. Chuck rushes at Lee using his inherent strength, and now he holds him by the neck in the same way that the monster held him just recently. The hero strangles the mutant and throws it to the floor, but he is sure that it is not over yet, because the message about the defeat of the enemy has not yet appeared. Approaching him, Chuck crushes his head with all his strength, and the long-awaited death sign finally appears. Since the guy has ideally analyzed a powerful target, now his body will change, and he acquires a new skill: restoration. Turning towards Root, the party discovers that he has escaped. Chuck suggests that we go after him, and he and Iso jump into a hole in the floor. Once in a sewer pipe, they quickly run in search of the monster that has disappeared from sight. Suddenly, something explodes ahead, and the collapsed stones block the hero's path, and they decide to return. On the way back, Chuck notices that one of the walls of the pipe is significantly different from the others, and after knocking on it, he realizes that it is a hiding place. The guy hits the wall with all his strength, it breaks, and the heroes see a room filled with red and orange magic stones. Chuck takes out his inventory and collects all the catalysts found in the warehouse. The guy hands Iso 5 orange catalysts at once, because without her, he would not have defeated Stevenson. He understands the full potential of the girl, in which you need to invest, and offers her to use stones and become stronger. Kyle Harris arrives at the place of his appointment and ponders why Chuck and Iso called him to such a quiet place. In his opinion, since the two had gone to the Awakened Lab, where he himself had only been once, it could turn the relationship between the leadership and the subordinates upside down. The car with the third squad finally arrives, and the heroes get out of it, reporting that they managed to clean up the laboratory. Unexpectedly for himself, Harris learns about the destruction of everyone who stood above him in position. Kayla breaks out in fear as Chuck puts a hand on his shoulder, asking if he wants to live. Having received an affirmative answer from him, the guy offers him to conclude a contract. Chuck activates the skill, and Kyle will have to agree to a pact that will henceforth work for Chuck and never betray him. Otherwise, if the rules of the agreement are violated, Harris will die. Kyle is cornered, and he sees no choice but to accept the proposal. Since Harris is involved in public relations, Chuck gives him a task. Handing him the phone, the guy asks him to make a story from the information collected in it. That evening, Harris gathered the people and took to the podium with an important statement about Director Lee Stevenson. Kyle turns on the recording on Iso's phone, and the people are horrified by what they hear. After the recording has been listened to, footage taken in the laboratory where experiments on humans were carried out is turned on the screen. Harris informs the audience that Stevenson has been destroyed and introduces the people to the hero, their new leader, Chuck. Entering the stage, the guy addresses the gathered survivors, announcing to them that the time of the shield is coming to an end. The strength of the organization has gradually decreased, and now it has completely fallen, and Chuck announces that he must return to where he came from. However, so that the people are not afraid of the prospect of being left without a commander, the guy has a proposal. He offers to get 10 awakened with skills, a strong fortress, an abundance of supplies, and go to a new paradise. With these words, a column of cars of the Molotov gang drives into the stadium. And now the whole gang, led by Kirk, is standing behind Chuck, ready to escort the survivors gathered here to the cars. People begin to joyfully chant Chuck's name, and according to the scoreboard, in this way his authority grows many times over. From afar, standing on a tree branch, a person watches everything that happens with interest. The observer is Han Woodson, the third deputy of the National Intelligence Service. People load into cars and Chuck thanks Kirk for his help. DuPaul recognizes the guy as a real leader because he is capable, generous, and knows the future. Kirk addresses his brothers and introduces them to the new leader of the Molotov gang, Chuck. The gang members welcome the new leader, and his deputy DuPaul promises to follow the guy's orders from now on. Chuck is confused. He can't believe that Kirk gave him his seat right away, and he thanks the gang. A column of trucks filled with people moves out, but suddenly a crowd of zombies appears on the road. Noticing that Chuck is preparing for a fight, DuPaul asks to leave it to his gang and orders the members of the Hammer to prepare for an attack. Having strongly accelerated their trucks, they rush forward, crushing the monsters with their wheels. The people in the cars are impressed by how easily the gang deals with the mutants and are very happy about their victory. As they approach the imposing gate of the settlement created by Chuck's friends, everyone opens their mouths in surprise. Noticing their leader through binoculars at the head of the approaching crowd, the guards open the gates. Taking a look at the unbelievable settlement, Chuck can't believe that he is in the village he knew. From time to time, the guy received letters through Monon about business in the village, but he did not imagine that everything had changed so much. Professor Monica happily runs to meet Chuck and Iso to inquire about how they are doing. According to her, many units have appeared in the village, and the girl offers to show them everything here. At first, Monica accompanies them to the city security department, where a training session is being held under the guidance of Park Dalbon. Seeing his grandfather, who is now the head of city security, Iso happily throws himself into his arms. Watching the training, Chuck thinks that members of the Hammer Gang can be brought here as well. Monica suggests that he go look around, and Iso wants to stay with his grandfather for now. Now Chuck has come to familiarize himself with the intelligence department, which is run by Dr. Kim. Each scout has a mouse. One of them suddenly begins to squeak, and the soldier announces that he has received a signal about the threat from Zone A3. Professor Kim himself appears in the office, very happy to see Chuck return. Then the hero and Monica go to the Ministry of Construction, which is run by Elder John. After getting acquainted with many more departments, they go to the district center, where a statue of Chuck rises in the middle of the square. Monica is still showing the hero the municipalities, but then a soldier runs up to them with an urgent message for the leader. According to him, some people arrived in the settlement, and there is information that they are from the NIR, the National Intelligence Agency. Despite the fact that the delegation was stopped at the entrance, they still went forward. The man in the middle, introducing himself as Han Woodson, the former deputy director of the NAR, asked Chuck to take a minute to inform him about something important. After analyzing it, the hero learns that in front of him is a rank Yi person, identified as neutral and farsighted. Chuck suggests that he go with him to a quieter place, and as he retreats, Han orders his men to be ready. Sitting in the reception room across from the village leader, the man asks him if it is possible that he does not trust the government. Chuck thinks it would be strange to say something nice about those who abandoned the humans, moving the administrative center to the island as soon as the zombies appeared. Khan agrees with the guy. He thinks the government is incompetent. According to him, in order to survive, those in power abandoned people, and besides, they became obsessed with religious cults. Han wonders if Chuck has heard anything about the immortal cult, and the boy shudders. The immortal cult worships zombies, and people join it, wanting to gain immortality. At the initiation ceremonies, leader Charles Madison unleashes zombies on the bound people in front of a cheering crowd, which bite them, turning them into monsters. Han hands Chuck a picture of the leader, who is awakened, and people think he has unique skills. According to the man, Madison somehow controls the zombies. Charles first appeared on the 30th day of the zombie invasion, appearing in the middle of the forest in front of a crowd of people fleeing from monsters. He began to speak to the zombies in the name of the Lord, calling the evil creatures to follow him. In front of the astonished crowd, the mutants froze at his words, stopping the chase. Madison encouraged people to follow him and believe in the immortals, as believers will be blessed by God. As a result, the entire province fell into the hands of the cult in just a month. They were so fast that even the president was surprised by their power. The president asked Woodson to set up a meeting with the leader of the immortal cult. Despite all the warnings of the deputy director of intelligence, he wanted to use Madison to get inland. Lowering his head, Han admits that he is very tired of everything, and he is already sick of the leader's medicines. He shows Chuck a vial of liquid, which they inject into their bodies on Charles's orders. After activating the analysis, the hero becomes aware that he has a nutrient solution in his hands, the liquid of a vengeful spirit. The medicine is addictive, increases physical parameters, and resembles the root that Chuck saw in the laboratory. According to Woodson, the government eventually became part of the immortal cult as well. He rejects Chuck's suggestion that the organization may be a good one, since it saves people and deals with an incompetent government. With the help of his clairvoyant talent, Han learned about how cult members make medicines out of humans. Therefore, he asked Chuck to help him stop the immortal cult, and in return, he offers him certain information. Because the more people there are in the settlements, the more acute the issue of nutrition arises, and the problem needs to be solved. In the area that Han shows on the map, there are military and also an awakened one related to food. According to Woodson, only a few military personnel are aware of this, as they hide the existence of awakened with skills. Han doesn't mind Chuck and his men taking down this unit, known for its sinister deeds. As a sign of trust, Woodson provides the guy with another information known only to him. He tells him about a hellish place where there are madmen who love fighting. They call themselves players and fight without thinking about life, as if they were characters in the game, members of small guilds. Of course, they are very strong, and among them there is a guy named Ian who is called Hercules. When Chuck asks if Han has thought of contacting the players, the man replies that they are not interested in a religious cult or the government. The hero extends his hand to Woodson and thanks him for such useful information. The two of them are looking forward to the upcoming collaboration, and Han asks Chuck to do him one more favor once they get outside. Finding himself in front of Woodson's escorts, Chuck defiantly promises him to think about his proposal. When asked by one of his colleagues what they talked about, Khan replies that he offered the guy to work for the government. The former deputy director asks Agent Smith to be calm because he could not talk to Chuck about anything else. Woodson is glad that he managed to deceive the agent, but from now on he needs to be more careful. After seeing them off, Chuck asks the scouts for information about the military camp, which Han told him about. According to the information received, the elders in this camp are absolute evil. The armed forces number 3,000 men, and there are 3 tank battalions. Having secured all the necessary information, Chuck is ready to go there. The guards are surprised by the sudden appearance of the motorcycle, not understanding how it was able to overcome the barrier on the road. Terrified, a sergeant runs out to meet them, clutching his head at the sight of the strong awakened. Soldiers collapse in fear of a guy who offers to surrender if they value their lives. The sergeant falls to his knees in front of Chuck and surrenders. And when he and the girl enter the territory, he asks on the radio to send all the platoons to help. Reaching the main building, the heroes find that the military is already waiting for them here. Noticing the approach of the enemy, the commander cannot believe that they were ordered to surrender by only 2 people. His assistant advises you to be careful, because the arrivals look like awakened with skills. The commander promises Chuck and Iso to spare them if they surrender immediately and become loyal to him. The hero shouts to the commander and the colonels that he has heard about all their atrocities and will immediately kill them. The soldiers open fire, but Chuck and Iso rush forward at such a speed that bullets fly away from them. The soldiers are terrified that their weapons are powerless against the opponents approaching them. A few seconds later, Chuck and Iso destroy the tanks aimed at them. The guy grabs the commander by the throat and asks if he wants to say something last. The commander snatches a pistol from his belt and puts it to the enemy's head. He shoots, but the bullets fly off the guy without causing him any harm. Seeing how easily Chuck dealt with the general, the rest of the soldiers decide to surrender immediately. Gathering the entire squad in front of them, the heroes try to find out the details about the awakened one, who is in the camp. As it turned out, 2 months ago, the soldiers had come to the elder to ask him for help because the people in their camp were dying of hunger. The man provided them with food, but the commander still gave the residents 2 small portions. However, when the elder tried to speak out about this to the general, he ordered him to be captured. After learning where the slave is, Chuck goes to the food warehouse, where he meets the elder. After analyzing it, the guy learns that in front of him is Farmer Elon, an F-rank man. Chuck introduces himself to him and informs him that the man has nothing to worry about anymore, because the general who caused him to be here has been killed. Upon learning of the death of the scoundrel, Elon is overjoyed. He thanks the guy for saving him. As the expert's favor has reached the required level, Chuck gains his farming skill. Now, having received this skill, the guy decides to convince Elon to go with him to the village. Chuck asks him for help, but the farmer, taught by bitter experience, initially refuses to go with him. However, the guy asks to at least visit their village and promises that the man can leave at any time if he does not like it. The Hammer Gang came to the camp at the call of Chuck to ensure the transfer. Kirk, seeing the tanks in the camp, asks the leader to allow him to take them with him. The hero thinks this is a great idea because if you remake tanks with Dupal's skill, they can become very useful. By activating his ability, Kirk gains a combo robot, which can also buff machines. The other gang members ask Chuck to allow them to improve their machines as well. Having received the go-ahead, Dupal improves all the machines of the Hammer, and the column returns to the village. Seeing how Chuck is met in the settlement, Elon is convinced that the guy is much better than he thought of him. Smiling, the old man apologizes for doubting him and asks to be accepted into his community. Elon goes to inspect the fields, where the soldiers are sowing something at this very moment. The man approaches them, activating his skill, and right in front of the eyes of others, a whole sea of corn grows on the field. Monica praises Chuck for a job well done, which will result in all the villagers being fed. She considers it necessary to give a name to their settlement, and after thinking about it, the guy suggests that she call it the Human Association. Now that he's done with all the urgent matters, Chuck decides to boost his skills with the gems he's collected in his inventory. For a whole week, the guy studied with experts in order to increase the level of his abilities with the help of catalysts. He shares the good news with Monica, who in turn also tells him the news. According to her, after the capture of the military camp, many new survivors appeared in the village, and among them, there are a couple of awakened ones. Monica gives Chuck a list of newcomers, and the guy sees what other skills he can get from them. The first two, a blacksmith and a designer, are able to create various items using their abilities. Chuck analyzes the objects brought to him: a sharp knife with enhanced cutting, as well as a durable top, reinforced protective equipment. There is also a thief on the list of the awakened, and according to Monica, his skill lies in the fact that he is very good at digging. After learning that the thief's ability to do this is simply amazing, Chuck decides that he can help them found an underground city. A scout enters the office with a report on the place that the hero saw in his 99th nightmare. Chuck examines the photos obtained by the intelligence department and learns that there are about 30,000 high-level mutants there. The guy believes that it's time to start aiming at big cities, and therefore plans to call the leaders of all departments for a meeting. When he gathers at the meeting, he informs the leaders of his plans, and this time he wants to take the guards with him. According to Professor Kim, the spies he sent looked at their destination very carefully, but they never managed to see the huge monster that Chuck was talking about. The hero knows that the mutant is difficult to find because he did not stick out until the attack in Nightmare 99, so they have no choice but to go there themselves. Professor Kim has already mapped out areas where survivors can be found. Elder John promises to do everything possible to carry out reconstruction so that it will be possible to resettle all the rescued. According to Monica, they already have weapons and armor ready. There are only small parts left for departure, which will take only one day. So the attack is scheduled for tomorrow, and the meeting is over. As Chuck leaves the office, a soldier approaches him with a message that the heads of the production department are looking for him. The guy comes to a meeting with blacksmith Mike and clothing designer Helen, who is very excited about meeting the leader. She suggests that Chuck not waste time, because she and the blacksmith are going to make weapons and armor for him for tomorrow's campaign. Mike asks the leader to show him his weapon, and the guy hands him his chains. After taking the chains and promising to return them tomorrow, the taciturn blacksmith leaves, and Helen asks Chuck to follow her. The chatty and cheerful designer takes measurements from the guy, driving him into the paint with compliments and promises to sew the perfect outfit for him. The next day, Mike and Helen appear on the doorstep of Chuck's office, who, as promised, managed to prepare everything on time. The leader analyzes a high-end D-rank leather suit made by the hands of a high-status person. To his surprise, the suit is able to increase mana, adjust movements, and give insane strength. According to Helen, it took her 3 magical orange stones to create this outfit. After receiving the chains from Mike, Chuck learns that they have been modified by an expert and their functions have been greatly improved. As a special weapon, the blacksmith has added a new powerful explosion capability to the chain. Having gathered, Chuck goes out to the soldiers, who are already ready to show the monsters all the strength of people. On the way to their destination, intelligence informs Kirk that a huge crowd of zombies has appeared on their way. Dupal informs the army and orders them to eat a snack prepared by an expert to increase their stats. Opening fire and running over monsters with the heavy tracks of their tanks, upon reaching the place, Chuck's army disembarks from the cars, and scout mice run to meet them, reporting that the zombies are advancing from all sides. Sitting behind the wheel of his robot tank, Dupal orders them to prepare for battle. Chuck orders the soldiers not to be afraid of anything and announces that he himself will lead them into battle. Activating his new weapon, the hero destroys a whole crowd of zombies approaching them in one fell swoop. Following the zombies, huge mutant elephants appear, and Chuck gives the command to rush to attack. He himself also rushes into battle with the largest mutant, activating skills using the power of 700 people. The army can't believe that their leader was able to destroy the biggest monster with just one blow. Now a whole crowd of mutants is moving towards Chuck, and he decides that it's time to activate the explosive ability of his weapon. The explosion blows the monsters apart, and the army led by Kirk finishes them off with continuous automatic bursts. Watching the brave struggle of the soldiers, Chuck no longer doubts that a complete victory awaits them ahead. He decides to finish off the mutant elephant, and swinging his chain at him, knocks a green magic stone out of his forehead. The battle is over. Several soldiers have suffered minor wounds, but they will be able to move on after a short respite. To give the army a chance to rest, Chuck activates the wooden structure skill, protecting them from a possible attack. Placing wounded soldiers in front of him, the leader activates the heal ability. After resting, having a snack, and gaining strength, the column moves on in search of the very largest and most dangerous monster. Upon reaching the site, Chuck looks at the crack in the ground from which the monster appeared in his nightmare. They did not have to wait long. Very soon the monster appears on the surface, and the hero recognizes in it the root, which they missed in the laboratory of the Awakened. Those present cannot believe. The appendages of the root are fighting with themselves, eating their own flesh. After some time of fighting with himself, the monster falls dead, and a blue magic stone rolls out of it. Chuck is about to pick up the rock, but Root reaches out its tentacles towards it. The hero activates the ability of the Blue Flame Dragon and slashes the monster, but it is obviously stronger than he thought. Chuck activates the power of 700 people, and then a wooden structure that intertwines with the root, trying to strangle him. Realizing that this is only the beginning of the war, the leader orders everyone to strengthen themselves with magic stones in order to continue the fight. Having occupied the city besieged by monsters, Chuck's army helped the survivors in every possible way, gradually taking them to their settlement. 10 days passed in this way as the army moved forward, destroying monsters and rescuing survivors. On the 11th day, Chuck is informed that, according to the reconnaissance squad, there are no more monsters left in the city. Soldiers honor their leader. They are ready to follow him anywhere to save the survivors. After the capture of the city, the military forces were divided and involved in all directions. Thanks to the abundant arrival of magic stones, the army quickly became much stronger. In just a month, the Union of Humanity managed to capture almost the entire district. After capturing the last town in the county, Chuck speaks to the soldiers with words of gratitude for their service. The leader promises everyone to have a grand feast as soon as they return home. The plaque informs Chuck of an incredible achievement. The hero is declared the winner, and for this he receives 2 awards. He can now freely organize the territory of the Union of Humanity within the reclaimed province, and also gains the skill choice and concentration. Returning home as the leader had promised, the soldiers were rewarded with a feast right in the Union of Humanity Square. Monica walks into Chuck's office and offers him a drink, but he's a little busy thinking. His new special skill Pick and Focus can boost 3 pick skills for 3 hours, but in this case, all other skills except for special skills will not be available. Chuck decides to upgrade the Divine Demonic Martial Art, Acoustics, and Rule by 1 rank. The guy asks Monica if she managed to find out anything about Root, but the researchers were unable to find out anything about him. According to the professor, this Root may be from the spirit world, like the one that was in Iso's soul. Monica suggests that she may be able to figure out something else thanks to the amplifying power of the catalyst. She wants to try to read the memories of those cells, but she realizes that this is very dangerous. After all, if you look at the memories of strong creatures, there is a chance to get a shocking experience. Chuck decides to take a look, because in order to recognize the enemy, they need to prepare, and now they are already standing in front of the tied root cell. Taking the guy's hand, Monica stretches out her palm towards the monster, activating the reading memories. Suddenly, they find themselves in a red desert, where a cold white moon hangs in the sky, and he and the girl cast white shadows. A wild roar is heard from behind the hill, and a terrible monster with a bunch of toothy mouths and one big eye appears from there. Chuck realizes that the main body is in front of him, and looking into the eye, sees his reflection in it. The guy becomes ill, he loses his balance, Monica picks him up and offers to escape. The sign says that they need to escape from the memory, but they need to be careful as they may be prevented from escaping. The escape process is still 7%, and the shell is starting to crack. The escape has already reached 30%, and the monster, not wanting to give them the opportunity to escape, rushes after them in the form of a ball with many eyes. When the process reaches 90%, the hands reaching out to the characters surround them on all sides. Monica hugs Chuck, the shell cracks, and she and the leader return to reality. Sitting over a cup of coffee and discussing what happened, the professor wonders where exactly they have been, because the place did not look like Earth, and how the monster could recognize them in his memories. Since the monster is so strong that it can do something so absurd, Chuck needs to become even stronger as soon as possible. The guy asks the professor to calculate the possibility of expanding the territory of the Union by building an underground city. This idea came to Chuck because he had already discussed with Monica that expanding the territories would not be effective. And since he was rewarded with the opportunity to proclaim the territory of the Union, you need to understand how to proceed. He reminds the professor that there is an awakened grave robber in their settlement who can help them with this. With the help of magic stones, Chuck plans to strengthen all the building materials to avoid possible collapses, and in order to get as many stones as possible, the guy decides to go into business and get them with the help of gamers. Having climbed to the highest point of the settlement, Chuck determines the boundaries of the territory he proclaims. The scoreboard clarifies whether he is confident in his choice, because the territory he has chosen is very small, and the leader gives an affirmative answer. Once the victor, Chuck designates the territory of the Union of Humankind, all the residents also see a sign that says that the people here will benefit. Suddenly, everyone begins to feel lightness in their bodies, and the awakened feel the mana in their bodies increase. Chuck enjoys watching the villagers' reactions to what is happening and how they honor their leader. Together with Iso, the hero goes to the territory of gamers, where identification signs hang everywhere. Formidable men with clubs come out to meet them, ordering the newcomers to stand in their places. After analyzing the person who started the conversation first, Pete, Chuck learns that he is a simple man awakened by rank D. The guy introduces himself as the commander of the Union of Humanity, but the gamers have not heard of this and want to know what these two are doing on their territory. Chuck explains that he's here to do business with them and wants to meet Mr. Mick. According to Pete, there are no people with this name here, and the hero calls his nickname Hercules. Thinking that the arrivals are representatives of the government, Pete laughingly replies that Hercules does not need to meet with them. Chuck takes out his inventory, from where various items fly out, and asks the gamers to take a look at the goods he sells. Pete is surprised to see clothes that have special abilities and food that enhances abilities. Chuck asks if that's all enough for them to meet Hercules. In response, Pete offers to leave them his things and the girlfriend, and promises to give them back later after the meeting. Chuck wanted to settle things calmly, but looking at Iso after this suggestion, he only asks her to let them live. Stretching her fists, the girl rushes at Pete and begins to beat the gamer, who did not have time to understand anything. A battered Pete crashes into the gym where Mick is working out to inform him of the guests who have arrived. Immediately after him, Chuck and Iso appear in the doorway, greeting Hercules and introducing themselves to him. According to the analysis, Mick is a C-rank person, an awakened bodybuilder. According to Hercules, the guests apparently had a reason to beat Pete, and he should apologize to them for his bad manners. Chuck reveals that the purpose of his visit is to sell some things, and Mick offers to show him what they have. Studying things, Hercules is interested in whether magic stones were used to prepare strengthening food. Chuck explains that they don't need to use catalysts to do this, as all the food is prepared by an awakened chef from their union. Mick has never seen awakened with everyday skills because gamers recruit only awakened fighters. Chuck offers to buy his goods for the price of 3 magic stones for 1 dish, and things will cost more. Hercules thinks it's too expensive, but the guy insists that the dishes are necessary for life. Mick realizes that the guy is telling the truth, but is afraid that if he accepts his offer, they will be deceived while he takes the stones. Chuck offers Hercules a good discount on goods in exchange for a cooperation agreement between the two unions. He asks Mike about the Immortal Cult and tells him everything he knows about the organization. In order to cooperate with gamers, potential allies need to prove that they are worthy of it, not in words but in deeds. Chuck and Iso go with Mick to the arena to prove their strength in the fight, and the gamers are confident that their leader will defeat the merchants. Since strength is the main indicator for Hercules, Chuck activates choice and concentration, boosting 3 of his skills. Everyone around them, including Iso, is amazed at the pressure that the hero exerts on them by his mere presence. Upon seeing a worthy opponent, Hercules activates body enlargement and becomes several times larger than the enemy. Gamers who support him are sure that in this state, their leader is invincible. Hercules, swinging, lowers his light weapon over Chuck, but the guy holds it with one hand. Before he knows it, the enemy rushes at him, knocking him down with one blow. Chuck suggests that Hercules stop the battle because he has already proved his strength to him, but Mick wants to continue. He wakes up in bed with his arm bandaged, and Pete stands over his head crying, thinking that the leader is dying. Chuck appears in the ward with a swollen eye, who also got a little in this fight. Hercules enjoyed the battle with a worthy opponent, and now he is looking forward to cooperation. Finally, he asks the leader of the Union of Humanity to sell goods cheaper and receives his consent. As a gift from himself, Chuck activates the regrowth skill, and Hercules' hand is instantly healed. An alliance of alliances has been formed, and now gamers can purchase goods supplied by Harris at an affordable price. The gang members cannot believe how cheap they are for such necessities of life. Thus, a whole crowd of customers lines up in front of the store with magic stones. Monica shows Chuck a sales report, according to which they receive 1,500 red and 250 orange stones. The leader asks the girl to distribute the 10th part of the income among the experts as a bonus so that they can produce even more goods. Professor Kim runs into the office reporting that Momon, who was sent to scout a nearby city, saw robots there. According to him, huge spider-like robots do not look like mutants because no magic stones have been found on them. According to Chuck, they need to hire the creators of these mechanical machines. After all, if you mechanize all the ground and underground fortifications in the Union, then it can become a walking fortress. After learning of the location of the robots spotted by Monman, Chuck and Iso set out to find them. Upon reaching the said location, Chuck analyzes the spider robots to learn about their abilities. According to the analysis, these are F-rank crafted items with skill power that possess low artificial intelligence. The heroes approach the robots, which find the intruder in the forbidden area, and order the arrivals to stand still. Chuck, raising his hands, declares that he does not intend to fight and just wants to talk to the owner of the robots. The spider summons the parent object, and they are joined by a small modified robot introducing himself as Wilson, the Grand Master's butler. According to analysis, it is a created Yi-rank bodyguard robot that is filled with skill power and has a very high artificial intelligence. Wilson asks the party to drop their weapons and follow him, warning them that they will open fire if the guests use mana. The 3 of them enter a room with white walls, where robots with weapons are aimed at the arrivals from all sides. There are cameras in the corners of the room, and a voice from the speakers asks what they want from him. Chuck explains that he came from the Union of Humanity in order to hire a robot creator. The voice, noticing that the guests do not look like members of the Immortal Cult, clarifies what they offer in return. The scientist has food, friends in the form of robots, and safety, so the voice is interested in what they can offer to someone who has everything. In response, Chuck offers to provide more interesting projects for research. Pulling a photograph out of his pocket, he reveals that he plans to turn the city into a walking fortress. In addition, according to Chuck, imprisonment in such a small plant can end badly for the inventor. Hearing this, the scientist gets angry, and the robots surround the heroes, preparing to attack. Suddenly, Wilson asks the owner to stop and not shoot, since he was able to predict 100% defeat of the robots. In the scientist's chair, as it turned out, there is a girl who is surprised by Iso's incredible strength to defeat her robots. After a minute of reflection, the inventor nevertheless decides to go out to the guests. According to the analysis, the girl's name is Rasha Korkowski. She is only 23 years old. She is a mechanical engineer, a person of rank E, and is under guard. The girl meets Chuck, and Wilson begins to sound the alarm, determining that she has an increased heart rate due to fear. Rasha is shaking all over. She admits that she is afraid of them and does not want to die. Chuck activates the Heal of the Soul skill. The girl's pulse returns to normal, she calms down, and Wilson rejoices with joy. All four go into the living room, where the girl reveals that she is the daughter of a mechanical engineer who came here from Russia. She began her training here, came to practice at the factory, and got stuck on its territory due to the zombie invasion. According to Chuck, it will be difficult for Rasha to stay out of civilization for a long time, and he shows her photos and videos of the union of humankind. The girl does not believe her eyes so much that at first she even decided that she was photoshopped, but now she believes the guess. Chuck convinces her that the idea of a walking fortress is absolutely real and doable, but they need Rashi's help. In addition, they need someone in charge of the project, and it would be nice to create a robot with the same intelligence as Wilson. However, the girl, embarrassed, admits that she came up with this robot by accident, and no matter how she tried to create the same one in the future, she did not succeed. Remembering that the inventor mentioned the immortal cult, Chuck asks her if a cult member has come to the factory. Wilson turns on the projector to show a video of the arrival of these powerful people here. The bishop of the doctrine of immortality then spoke to the robot, stating that those who were in this factory had been granted an oracle. The masked man suggested that Rasha join the immortal cult in order to gain incredible power and power. The girl was given 2 days to think about it, but if she refused, she was threatened with the wrath of God. Chuck asks Rusha to help the Union of Humanity, and in return promises to protect her even if she refuses to help them. Wilson asks the hero if they have canned food in stock, and learns that there are a lot of fresh vegetables in the Union, as well as special dishes from the chef. Rasha is excited by the idea that she will finally be able to eat fresh vegetables and not eat only canned food. Having prepared everything necessary and taking Wilson with her, the girl follows the heroes. However, before they can leave the factory, their path is blocked by members of the immortal cult, who were apparently watching Rasha. According to analysis, Chuck is confronted by Ian, an extremely hostile godlike zombie with humanoid zombies gathered behind him. He is indignant that Rasha dared to refuse the oracle, and the girl hiding behind Chuck's back once again repeats that she does not want to join them and asks them to leave. Ian asks the girl to come up to him, otherwise he threatens to kill everyone who stands next to her. Assuming a hostile pose, Chuck orders the immortal cult to escape as soon as possible. Offended by his audacity, Ian orders his companions to destroy their opponents and take Rasha away, and they rush into battle. Chuck informs Iso that they are not people, but zombies, and it will not be difficult for the girl to deal with them. She rushes forward without hesitation, literally tearing the attacking monsters to pieces. Wilson also does not stand aside. He activates the combat mode and, releasing metal-sharp tentacles, pierces the zombies with them. Following the tentacles, the robot unleashes its machine gun arms and fires at enemies who try to grab its owner. Exclaiming how dare they ignore the oracle, Ian summons the forces to offer sacrifice to the great immortal god. According to the scoreboard, the sacrificial ceremony is about to begin, and a sacrifice will be offered. Meanwhile, Uiso stands among the remaining zombies, who are writhing in pain and unbearable agony. One of them crawls up to Chuck with a request to kill him, and the guy reaches out his hand to him. It activates the heal skill, but it does not work, as it is impossible to heal what is already dead. Ian takes out a glowing orb and, exclaiming that he is doing it for the sake of the great immortality, swallows it. The swallowed orb turns him into a huge monster with wings, 6 green eyes, and a creepy mouth. He lunges at Iso, but she deftly dodges the blows of his spine-shaped whip. As she accelerates, she jumps and delivers a powerful blow to the monster's head, causing him to drop his whip and spray black blood to the sides. While Chuck compliments Iso on a job well done, Wilson cleans up the grounds, piling up pieces of torn zombies. Upon reaching the Union of Humankind, Rasha enjoys eating delicious food made from fresh ingredients. She could not even imagine that she would be so happy to have a comfortable bed in the house provided to her. Wilson advises the girl to prove to her rescuers that she is useful, because this way others will reckon with her importance. Chuck meets with Hercules to tell him about the battle with the members of the immortal cult. Together, they plan to wait for the enemies to reach their neighborhood so that they can unite and attack them in both directions. Charles Manson kneels before the root, offering his prayers to the great immortal God. Listening to the monster's voice, he summons his assistants to inform them that a servant of the devil has broken through. It's time to move forward, and Charles orders a great army of 10,000 immortals to be assembled. Having given the order, he rejoices, because very soon, as a faithful servant, he will join the great immortal. Professor Kim informs Chuck that the scoundrels have reached the city, and their number is about 7,000. Immortals attack at great speed in 4 directions, and each squad is led by commanders. The hero uses a radio receiver to transmit the received information to Hercules, to the barracks of the gamers. The ally offers to leave the western part of the city on them, and Chuck and his men will take care of the eastern part. After wishing Hercules good luck and asking him to be careful, the leader asks Kim to start preparing the army for war. And now, after a very short time, an armed army led by Chuck, Iso, and Kirk moves out of the Union of Humanity. The commander of the Immortal Squad, Nina, asks the commander of the 7th Squad how things are on the battlefield. Hearing in response that his squad needs more time, the girl waves her hand. Without touching him, Nina lifts him into the air and begins to strangle him, because yesterday he told her the same thing. Panting, the commander asks her for forgiveness, and she throws him aside, deciding to deal with everything herself. Leaving the tent, Nina directs her hand in the direction of the ongoing battle, and a wild tornado is formed from her movement. The tornado swallows all Union soldiers in its path. The 2 fighters notice whose hands it is and decide to kill the witch, focusing on firepower. A few more people join them, and they all open fire on the girl. However, Nina waves her hand again and is protected by a black orb, reaching which the bullets freeze motionlessly. Snapping her fingers, the girl sends the entire swarm of bullets back in the direction of the stunned soldiers. One of them manages to survive, and drawing a sword, he rushes at the witch. Smiling, Nina entangles him in nets of black smoke, about to play her favorite game, dolls. The man's body moves against his will, and now he is rushing with weapons at his allies, begging them to run away from him. After finishing them off, Nina orders her subordinates to move faster from now on. Suddenly, there is an explosion, and the members of the immortal cult are blown to pieces right in front of the witch. An entire army of the Union of Humanity rushes into the attack again, one by one, cutting off the heads of humanoid zombies. Nina sends a tornado at her opponents again, but Chuck, who immediately appears, cuts it with his chains. Standing in front of the Archbishop girl, the hero activates analysis and learns that she is an awakened mutant using telekinesis. Chuck orders the army to deal with the leaders and members of the cult while he takes over Nina. The girl entangles the hero's arms and legs with her telekinesis, about to tear them off. Chuck activates the board using the power of 400 people, as well as acoustics. A battle ensues, and Nina realizes to her horror that her telekinesis isn't working against this guy. After several futile attempts to overcome her opponent, the witch finds herself hanging by the throat in his arms. The cult members want to rush to her aid, as it will be over for them as soon as the breach is activated, but Iso does not allow them to do so. Even with her neck twisted, Nina is still alive, and remembering what she was going to do to him, Chuck rips out her arms and legs. The sacrifice ceremony begins, and Nina is offered as a sacrifice. One by one, the mutants who fought the Union Army begin to give up their breath and fall to the ground. Nina explodes with a bright purple fire in Chuck's hands, and then turns into a large shell hanging in the air. The shell sends out stems, which, developing in different directions, begin to spread the shell. The flaps are torn apart like a cocoon, from which a renewed Nina flies out with butterfly wings. It envelops all the soldiers in telekinesis, from which everyone stands as if rooted to the ground, unable to move. Chuck activates choice and concentration, combining divine demonic martial art, acoustics, and rule, resulting in the temporary skill King's Body. Nina swings her whip at the hero, but he grabs her with his bare hand and pulls her towards him with incredible force. Chuck jerks at the whip and Nina falls to the ground, not understanding how he managed to resist her power with such ease. Getting back on her feet, she calls on her people to rise up, and zombies begin to rise from the ground, mutating into terrible monsters. Soaring above the ground, Nina orders them to kill Chuck and overwhelms him with huge boulders. However, the guy reflects the falling stones away from him with a bright blue flame, and the boulders fly away from him in different directions. Blue rays reach Nina and burn her alive, causing the monster's charred body to fall to the ground. However, after a couple of seconds, she gets back on her feet and once again swings her whip at Chuck. Before Nina knows it, the guy is behind her and pierces her body with a sharp beam of light. Finally, the monster loses its strength and its body dries up, tearing into pieces. The soldiers of the Union of Humanity rejoice in honor of their powerful leader. According to ISO, the army suffered few casualties. Only a couple of people were wounded. One of the soldiers brings a message from Hercules, informing him that there is an archbishop on the west side, and he plans to go ahead and blow off the enemy's heads. Chuck is confident that the gamers will cope with the archbishop. Therefore, having gathered the soldiers, he urges them to move to the next district. Archbishop Oliver receives an urgent message from the cult leader about the destruction of Nana. Charles ordered everyone to retreat urgently, and so the archbishop deploys his troops. However, no sooner had the members of the immortal cult moved than the gamers, led by Hercules, appeared in front of them, blocking the way. The big man rushes at the archbishop with his fists, inflicting quick and powerful blows right in the face. The cult members rush to Oliver's aid, but the gamers prevent them from getting close to Hercules, protecting their leader. Upon learning that the archbishop has gone on the run, leaving his men behind, Chuck leaves command to Dupal, and he and Iso rush in search of the fugitive. With the help of power-ups, he accelerates the motorcycle to the limit and catches up with the truck pretty soon. After activating the explosion skill, Chuck directs it at the car, from which two cult members immediately jump out. The cloaked mutant asks the archbishop to run, hoping to stop the attackers, but Iso slashes his head with a single blow. The bishop, whose face is not visible, understands that the main power of the Union of Humanity lies in the guy standing in front of him. Chuck analyzes the enemy and learns that he is facing a new mutant. The caretaker Sylvester, apparently also awakened. Brushing the hood off his head, the archbishop asks the guy if he killed Nana, and having received an impudent affirmative answer, pulls daggers from under his cloak. Sylvester attacks, but Chuck deflects his blow with one slight movement so that the opponent flies aside. Three mutants arrive to help the overseer, and he activates the offering ceremony. Devouring the souls of his like-minded people, Sylvester becomes stronger, dressed in armor and armed with swords. But even this does not save him from the most powerful blow from Chuck, who again throws the enemy away from him. Back on his feet, the archbishop activates all the power he is capable of and directs it at the enemy. In response, Chuck activates the divine demon martial art, and in the next instant, only a skeleton remains of the enemy. The hero, twisting the neck of the skeleton, who still does not understand where such power comes from in an ordinary person, promises that soon the leader of the cult will follow all of them from his hand. Skull laughs because, in his opinion, he himself is a non-entity compared to Charles. And with these words, Chuck splits him into pieces. After finishing off all enemies, the hero meets with Hercules and praises him for a job well done. Now they need to find and destroy the leader of the immortal cult and the root. Chuck suggests splitting up their teams and moving forward while they're all warmed up. Rusha, who is crowded with many cult members, decides to try out Wilson's new function, the incinerator. The robot starts the function and burns the enemy with the strongest fire stream. Kirk demolishes the remaining bodies of the mutants with the bumper of his modified truck. Wilson transforms into a multi-armed robot, followed by Dupal. Both of them shower each other with compliments and confidently head towards the enemy. Charles Madison is informed that two enemy teams have teamed up against them. More than 5,000 members of the immortal cult and 10 archbishops have already been destroyed. As a result of the attacks, the artisan village may fall, and for the army of immortals, this will be the end. Madison orders a retreat, but to take as many artisans out of the village as possible to hold the ceremony. Charles could not have imagined that they would have to hold the ceremony so soon. He knows that if he gathers all the craftsmen, then all this can end in two ways. Charles will either go mad and become a monster, or he will be one step closer to becoming great. Approaching the Great Root, he asks him for mercy and promises to destroy all enemies for his sake. Chuck approaches a building that has green goo flowing out of its windows, and where, according to his information, kidnapped people are being held. After analyzing the goo, the guy learns that his fragments absorb people's life force, and this is probably related to the root. Climbing onto the roof of the building, Chuck easily dispatches several guards who were patrolling the area. In one of the rooms, exhausted and emaciated people lie on the floor, unable to resist the goo that absorbs their power. Members of the cult enter the room and, throwing themselves at their feet, people beg for mercy, apologizing for their disbelief in the power of immortality. Taking advantage of their remorse, the masked man chooses 3 people who, in his opinion, can be useful to him. He states that he is giving them a chance to escape the penitential room and become a leader like himself. Unfortunate people understand that if they refuse, they will be sucked to death, and they agree to follow in the footsteps of the leader. Taking 3 men from the room, he orders them to follow him, leaving the rest to die. Everyone heads to prepare for the ceremony, but Chuck stands in their way, blocking the way. Before the cult knows it, the guy slices open their skulls with one blow. The frightened prisoners cannot believe that this man has come here to save them and thank him for his kindness. Chuck activates soul healing so that the rescued can calm down, as they were still shaking with fear. The hero frees the other prisoners from the penitential room, and all the martyrs leave the building, not believing their luck. Going outside, Chuck spins his chain to the limit, and with one powerful blow, he destroys an entire building. Unfortunately, some prisoners could not be saved. The monster managed to suck all the life force out of them. Hercules really wants to go to the massacre of the leader of the immortal cult right now. In his opinion, it is better for them to deal with everything at once than to slowly build up their strength, as the cult members are doing now. Chuck agrees with Hercules, and does not even think of convincing him and going there alone, because they do not know how strong the leader is. The hero also does not intend to let his ally go alone, and Hercules once again understands that he is a good person who can be relied on. Having received his favor, the hero gains the opportunity to take over the transformation skill from him. A myriad of zombies crowded into the main square of the city near the temple, waiting for the enemy to advance. Madison is informed of the completion of preparations to defeat the devils. A column of the Union of Humanity Army, led by Chuck, is moving confidently toward the square. The hero analyzes his main enemy, Charles Madison. He is identified as an extremely hostile believer in a false god. Charles invokes the god of immortality, asking him to accept his offering and fill it. Mutating into a huge white monster with many limbs and red eyes, Madison rejoices that the god has finally recognized his loyalty. At the end of the ceremony, the enemy will have no chance of winning, and this was a hidden blessing. But Chuck does not understand what it is about. According to the monster, if it were not for this guy, they would not have been able to hold the ceremony for another 6 months. But as a result of his provocations, they succeeded. Therefore, as a reward, Madison gives Chuck a chance to join him and the immortal cult. Hearing this suggestion, Iso snorts contemptuously, because this way the monster will use them and throw them away, like the rest of his allies. Growing larger, Madison replies that the immortal cult never turns its back on its believers. He calls on the children of the immortal god to rebel, explaining that their death was temporary in order to achieve complete immortality. The leader calls on everyone to bow before the great power, and the mutants gathered in the square sing the praises of God with a wild roar. Standing a little behind, the gamers laugh at Madison, amusing him. Angry, the monster points his finger at one of them, and a powerful beam of energy is about to shoot the guy right in the forehead. However, Chuck shields him with himself and deflects the attack, redirecting the beam towards the zombies. Madison directs his great army towards the rebels, ordering the destruction of every single one. Rush declares war mode for Wilson, and the robot activates cooperative mode, summoning spider robots to follow him. Kirk also announces the command to move forward, and the army of the Union of Humanity confidently moves towards the enemy. Hercules, Chuck, and Iso work shoulder to shoulder through the ranks of monsters, destroying them with powerful blows. After a short time, all three find themselves near the leader of the immortal cult. The allies lunge at Madison, who waves his arms and blows black smoke in their direction. The tablet warns Chuck that he has inhaled the smoke of death, and there is an outflow of life force in his body. Hercules shouts that if the monster is going to stop him, he will have to come up with something better, and rushes at Madison. Iso is right there, followed by Chuck, gathering his strength and rushing into battle. A fairly crippled mutant throws off all three, mocking their abilities. Hercules rushes into battle again, but receives a strong blow to the face and falls, and Chuck rushes to his aid. The longer the monster stands on its feet, the stronger it becomes, and its enemies lose power due to the smoke of death. Chuck enhances his divine demonic martial art, giant transformation, and rain skills, activating skill synthesis, creating a special ruler's body. The guy easily withstands the blow of Madison's staff that falls on him. Then the hero himself delivers a powerful blow to the enemy, who cannot understand where this person has so much power after the deadly mist. The monster summons reborn zombies resembling mud heaps to help him. Hercules and Iso take care of these zombies so that their leader can take care of Madison in peace. Suddenly, the leader of the immortal cult shines brightly, ordering those who resist the god to meet their cruel end. The monster opens its mouth and a stream of smoke bursts out of it, which envelops Chuck. Suddenly, a sign appears in front of the hero, informing him that he can come into contact with the energy. Before Chuck has time to understand what all this means, the same eye that he and Monica saw appears in front of him. The boy activates the explosive ability, but it is unable to destroy the enemy. Chuck's life energy is again significantly reduced, but the ruler's body actively resists. The hero quickly recovers, and the eye cannot believe that this person can resist him with such force. Chuck gathers all the knowledge of the divine demonic martial art and defeats his opponent. Madison grabs the same gamer who recently shouted insults at him, ready to gouge out his eyes and then kill him. But at that moment, he suddenly notices that Chuck was somehow able to escape from the eye and get out of there. The monster threatens to kill the gamer if the guy approaches him, but the hero manages to tear off his hand with which he is holding the prisoner and save him. Madison can't understand why he can't regenerate, and having lost one arm, he attacks Chuck in a rage. The guy rushes towards him and deals a crushing blow to the monster. It falls and smoke rises to the sky. However, it is obvious that this is not the end, as the sky is illuminated with a bright purple light and lifts the monster's body upwards. According to the tablet, the high priest of the immortal cult descended. The guy understands that it will be difficult for him to cope with him, because if he was almost grabbed by just one eye, what can the whole monster do? The sign says that the system is being changed to current standards, and in the sky, the monster's body, shrouded in chains, regains its human form. The high priest descends to earth and, appearing before Chuck, invites him to become part of his family. According to Charles, he saw the potential of the guy and is sure that by working together, they can change a lot. When the hero asks why he needs to work with such a monster, the high priest suddenly spreads huge angelic wings behind his back to prove that he is not a villain. Charles claims that he is also a victim, like Chuck, and offers him revenge on the one who started it all. He reveals that he is just a wanderer whose home, the beautiful planet Camillin, has burned to the ground. The people on this planet were blessed with mana, and through this gift, a radiant civilization blossomed. On that planet, Charles was the guardian of the Holy Empire, and his name was Erastos. However, 10,000 years of the world ended in just one morning. There was an invasion of zombies that destroyed everything in their path. Erastos managed to escape, but in the forest he met the leader of the invaders, who promised to destroy this planet. The horned villain of the Balkans admitted that they were the ones who planted the zombies here. Then, using telekinesis, he began to strangle the guardian of the Holy Empire, but then offered him the chance to be reborn as a loyal soldier of his army. So Erastos lost everything, and now he wants to become stronger and take revenge. So, believing that his goal is no different from Chuck's, he reaches out to him and promises to support him. However, the hero is in no hurry to trust the fact that he is only a puppet in the hands of villains. According to Erastos, if he becomes stronger, he will be able to get out of this body, but to do so, he needs to destroy this planet. He asks not to worry about the heroes standing in front of him, because if they are under his protection, they will be able to survive. According to him, what Chuck is trying to save is insignificant, and he offers him to make the right choice for the sake of a higher goal and save himself from destruction. However, the guy rejects Erastos' offer and challenges him to a fight. After declaring that Chuck made the wrong choice, the monster regains its monstrous appearance. However, the hero is confident in the correctness of his decision, and pulling out the chains, notices that Hercules is already standing next to him, ready to help him in battle. Following him, both the gamers and Kirk with his army are preparing for battle. The monster taunts the bug-like humans who have teamed up, thinking they can defeat it. He kicks the ground, it splits, and the army begins to fall into the resulting abyss. Rusha sends her spider robots after her, which easily descend the steep slopes. Grabbing the falling soldiers with their tentacles, they pull them to the surface, preventing them from being burned in the bubbling lava below. Wilson grabs Kirk's transformer, saving him from death, and Dupal thanks him, considering himself now indebted to the robot. Everyone rushes into battle, but they understand that their strength is not comparable to the power of the monster, because it deals huge damage to its opponents with one wave of its hand. However, Chuck is confident in his abilities, and gathering all his will, he rushes at Erastos. Having received a powerful blow, the monster is at a loss, because he did not expect that the guy hides power of such a level. Before he knows it, Chuck flies at him again, striking the monster again. Taking advantage of the monster's confusion, All other allies of the hero also rush to help, covering the enemy with blows. Erastos is horrified to realize that he has been defeated, as he is no longer able to recover as he did before. The monster admits defeat, but promises that he and Chuck will definitely meet again, and it will happen in Seoul. Smiling, the guy in turn promises to wait for him where Erastos will come to an end. As the monster disappears, he reminds Chuck that his offer is still valid and they can team up. A sign appears notifying about the next achievement of the hero, the victory of the descended Erastos, and as a reward, the guy receives a special skill. From now on, Chuck does not need to receive the favor of experts, because thanks to the withdrawal skill, he will be able to get it simply by defeating the enemy. Rasha rushes to hug the hero, admitting that she was afraid that he would succumb to the temptation to join the demon. Wilson, who flew up, unlike the girl, is sure that Chuck would never have done this. Making sure that everyone is safe, the hero is going to move on, towards the island where the provisional government is located. When Chuck met with the deputy governor of the NAR, he revealed that the island had become the base of the immortal cult. Also, according to him, even the president and high-ranking officials are associated with the cult. However, since Erastos is defeated, it should affect all of them. A representative of the gamers enters Chuck's tent to inform him of the visit of the deputy manager of the NR. Han Woodson, already familiar to the hero, arrived at the camp together with NAR Admiral Kevin Norton, who is in charge of the Marine Defense Detachment. The Admiral introduces himself to Chuck, who, after analyzing him, learns that he is a friendly awakened D rank. Khan informs the leader of the Union of Humanity that despite strong defenses, the island was left without an owner. As it turned out, a meeting was convened to discuss the threat to the immortal cult. Members of the government demanded that reinforcements be sent to the cult, because if it fell, the holy water would not spread. At the moment when it was decided to send reinforcements, almost everyone present was suddenly enveloped in the mist of death, killed. Khan realized that this was the most opportune moment to finally overthrow the rotten government. In addition to the government, according to Khan, all those who received holy water from the immortal cult are now dead, the same drug he spoke of earlier. Despite all this, the cult-obsessed civil servants caused disaster on the island. The Admiral is ashamed to ask Chuck for this, but he wants to move all the inhabitants of the island to the Union of Humankind. The guy promises to give them such support and move everyone, because in this case he will be able to occupy the island himself. In return, both Han and Kevin promise to do everything they can to help the leader of the Union. The parties agree, and Chuck gets the opportunity to learn the skills of men, clairvoyance, and command. With the help of Admiral Norton, Chuck's men manage to easily get to the island and transport all the survivors without any problems. And so half a month passed, during which Kevin trained the ranks of the Army of the Union of Humankind. Chuck saw the man of command in action, because in just a few days the soldiers began to move as one. By activating the clairvoyance skill, the guy can now observe what is happening, for example, with gamers, without contacting them. Chuck is confident that there won't be any more problems if his moving fortress project goes well, but Iso thinks the idea is crazy. Nevertheless, the hero notes the high potential of the project, because there have been no problems with the preparation either. When Iso asks who will control the movement of the fortress, Chuck replies that this will be done by artificial intelligence. Just then, Rasha runs up to the heroes to tell them the good news that the first AI development has been completed. Chuck is impressed with how quickly the girl coped, because not even 2 weeks have passed since the day he asked her about it. Rusha admits that with an assistant like Wilson, it wasn't too difficult, because it was the robot that became the key to the AI plan. The heroes come to the research laboratory to familiarize themselves with Rashi's new achievements. The girl asks Wilson to demonstrate the results, and the robot switches to conversion mode. Now they have Wilson 2 in front of them, with amazing features and potential that Rush invites Chuck to try out for himself. The hero stretches out his hand, and the robot, having registered his database, gives him full access. According to the sign, now the guy has a special function, city management, thanks to which he can manage everything in the city that he thinks about. Now Chuck can look at any corner of the city, and all he has to do is think about that place, anywhere on the ground or below it. Closing and reopening his eyes, the hero finds himself hovering over one of the districts. Wilson explains to him that this is not teleportation, and his mind has been briefly moved here. To show the ability in action, the robot suggests that Chuck turn off the flashlight with his thoughts, and the people around him are surprised to notice that the light has gone out. Thus, the hero can now control everything, including electricity, water, and even defensive structures. Having moved to a now empty residential area, Chuck tries to manage defensive structures. According to Wilson, the construction of the walking fortress is 60% complete, and he proposes to inspect it. They move to the workshop, and Chuck watches as the legs for the fortress are assembled. A total of 8 legs are planned to optimize the balance, taking an ant as an example. Flying up to the sports field, Erastos calls on his faithful servants to rebel. From a crack in the ground, the commander of the Holy Knights of the Kingdom, Caesar, rises to the surface. The knight seems insignificant to Erastos, but he claims that it is too early for him to move and wants to know why he was summoned. The monster shares with his servant the memory of the battle with Chuck, and he is amazed by the strength of the hero. Erastos considers his enemy to be outstanding, and as such, he needs him to achieve his goals. He grants the knight the power to avoid the restriction of the system and orders him to destroy the base of the Union leader. Caesar wants to receive a worthy reward from Erastos, and having received power, he acquires a completely different appearance. Han informs Chuck about an area where he knows zombies are gathering in Seoul, and there are likely more than 1 million of them there. The hero understands that this is the work of Erastos, but he needs another week to finish the walking fortress. According to Khan, they have only 2 ways out: either leave this place or stop the zombies. However, it will take too much time and effort to rebuild the base to leave this place. Chuck decides to defend the Union with his defenses and asks Han to turn to the gamers for support. At this moment, Hercules appears on the doorstep, who, as it turned out, has already brought all his guys here. Khan is very surprised by such a quick appearance, because less than half a day later, he sent him an urgent message. Chuck informs Hercules that according to preliminary estimates, about 1 million monsters will need to be defeated. Despite the frightening numbers, the big man promises to support Chuck because they are not strangers to each other. From now on, the Union of Humanity enters a state of war, and Chuck instructs Han to prepare everyone well. Norton shows on the map exactly where the enemy is building a blockade, intending to attack them. Despite the huge number of enemy troops, Chuck is confident that they will cope, because the Union has become much stronger. All they have to do is hold out for 1 week while the walking fortress is completed. Norton is sure that they would definitely cope if the attackers were simple zombies. But if there are mutants, then it will be much more difficult. According to intelligence, the zombie army is led by Commander Skeleton, but Kim worries that even if the leader is destroyed, 1 million zombies will not stop. Norton proposes to assemble an army of volunteers. According to his calculations, about 30,000 people will be needed. Chuck asks Professor Monica to gather all the residents in the square to address them. Rising to the podium, the hero informs the excited people that an army of 1 million zombies is advancing on them. The army of the Union of Humanity has 4,000 fighters, and even if everyone in the fortress fights, they have no hope. People in the crowd, clutching their heads, think about how to escape as soon as possible, but Chuck explains that it is too late to escape, as the enemy has already surrounded them. The crowd begins to behave aggressively, accusing the leader of inaction and demanding that he take responsibility and save everyone. Chuck reminds them of how they lost their loved ones when the zombies first appeared, and only survived thanks to the Union. He wonders where they will all go once they leave this safe territory. Chuck asks if they all want to lose everyone they care about again. He promises to go out and fight the monsters to the end, as he always did. Suddenly, one of the men in the crowd, remembering how the zombie bit his son, shouts that now he is ready for revenge. He believes that if all of them have to die anyway, then it is better to join the leader. People standing nearby are inspired by his speech and also prepare to rush into battle, grabbing everything that comes to hand as a weapon. After a while, the entire crowd on the square is ready to follow their leader. Norton is pleasantly surprised by how quickly everyone has become one, and once again he is convinced that Chuck is an excellent leader. And although the leaders of the Union of Humanity counted on 30,000 volunteers, there will obviously be about 100,000. With his skills, Elder John strengthens defensive walls by covering them with sharp stakes. The monsters are getting closer, and Chuck gives the command to prepare for battle. Commander Skeleton orders his troops to kill everyone in their path until only ashes remain of the Union. The enemy is coming closer and closer, and now the monsters are fighting against the fortress walls, trying to destroy them. Elder John activates the wooden structure skill, and wooden vines grow out of the ground and wrap themselves around the mutant. Eva activates the Magic Girl skill and, soaring above the enemy, throws them into confusion. Norton gives the order to start the operation, and the special squad led by ISO rushes down the sheer wall. Eve summons Mudstone to help, and the golem, rising from the ground, saves the soldiers from the attack of monsters. After dealing with a few more mutants with the help of her magic, Eva flies up to Chuck to express her concern with the strength of her opponent. The hero asks her not to let her guard down if she is a real sorceress, and both of them rush into battle again. Volunteers located at the very top of the fortress drop heavy stone blocks on the monsters. One of the mutants reports to the skeleton that the human fortress is much stronger than they expected, and the First Army will have a hard time holding out. However, the commander is calm because this is only 1/10 of their entire colossal army. The skeleton gives the order to the troops to start the attack in turn. First get rid of the defenses, and then use the one they plan. It is already the third day of defense, and the monsters have not yet managed to break through the walls of the fortress. Norton reports to Chuck that about 90% of their ammunition has already been used. For so long, the Army of the Union of Humanity managed to hold out thanks to the increased protection of the fortress walls. Elder John repairs the damaged walls, but they continue to crumble too quickly. According to Norton, regular survivors have joined the construction of the walking fortress, so the expected completion time has been significantly reduced, and there are 2 days left to hold out. A new type of mutant is approaching the walls of the fortress, a green goo through which the skeleton and all internal organs are visible. The weakened walls of Zone 9 suddenly begin to melt, but Elder John's mana is almost gone. Taking a walkie-talkie in his hands, Chuck orders all citizens to urgently go underground, as they trained, because if the walls fall, they will not escape the massacre. Activate city management, and the defense mechanisms will now work according to plan. Chuck understands that it will be very difficult for people to stay underground for 2 days, especially if the acid monster burns the ground. He decides that first he needs to destroy the commander of the zombie army, because if he hits his head, his arms and legs will also shake. Norton gives the order to move on to Plan C and the guards to retreat to Area 2. Upon hearing that Chuck is going to fight Commander Skeleton, Hercules immediately appears ready for battle. They are also joined by Iso and Kirk, who are eager to destroy the leader of the zombie army. In addition to them, Eva flies up to Chuck. She also wants to fight with the others. And now all 5 are standing in front of the gate, preparing to go outside the fortress and fight the skeleton. Just then, there was an explosion outside the gates, and as they opened, Caesar decided that the Union of Humanity was surrendering. However, his assistant immediately explained that this was not the case, and the opponents had gone out of the gate to fight them face to face. Kirk activates the vehicle change, and the tank's tracks fire sharp saws that slice through zombies along the way. Everyone else also rushes into battle, and the ranks of monsters begin to thin out very quickly. Caesar's assistant wants to send all the troops against the enemy, but Caesar believes that there is no need for this, since he will soon be here. Activating his skills, Chuck clears his way to the skeleton with powerful power energy. Caesar admits that his opponent has great power and decides to show him mercy. At first, the zombie army commander's plan was to kill all of Chuck's allies, but leave him alive. But amazed by the strength of the spirit of the members of the Union of Mankind and the way they went beyond the wall to fight them, he decides to spare the awakened as well. However, in return, he asks to accept the seal of contracts in his heart. According to this contract, the awakened will henceforth be considered comrades of the zombie army. The awakened thinks Caesar is crazy if he thinks they will agree to it. Therefore, the skeleton asks the same question to the leader of the Union, and he also gives him a negative answer. Chuck reminds Caesar of himself in the past, when he was the commander of the Knights of the Holy Empire. He was desperately fighting zombies when he met Erastos on his way. He offered Caesar and his knights salvation in exchange for loyalty, but everyone else in the village would have died at the hands of the monsters. The commander rejected Erastos' proposal and ordered his companions to prepare for battle. However, immediately another image of Erastos appeared in front of them, a monster with several toothy mouths and an eye in the middle. As a resident of a world once destroyed, Caesar advises Chuck to keep in mind that the fight lasts only a moment. However, the guy believes that even if this is the case, people should continue to fight for their lives. Chuck asks his allies if everyone is ready for battle and receives an affirmative answer from them. The battle begins, but suddenly Caesar swings his sword and a transparent dome forms over Chuck's head, shipping him from his comrades. The hero tries to split the walls of the dome with his chains, but they are too strong and do not succumb to his power. The guy sees that his friends are shouting something to him, but the dome blocks out even the sounds. Caesar swings his sword again, and then a unicorn appears next to him, riding which the monster rushes at Chuck. The hero deflects his opponent's blows with dignity, but suddenly, unable to withstand the pressure of his horse, he falls. He understands that it is gentle for him to remain calm in order to get out of this cage as soon as possible. However, his opponent is an experienced knight who is much stronger than Chuck thought, and it will be difficult to cope with him. Noticing that Caesar and his horse complement each other perfectly, the guy decides to make a last attempt. He rushes towards the enemy, taking the blow of the skeleton sword, and cuts off the horse's horn. Caesar begins to swing his sword out of anger, but does not make targeted blows, and this confirms Chuck's guess. The guy understands that the enemy is not going to kill him, but wants to keep him alive and make him one of his henchmen. The hero activates the king's power and pounces on the wounded horse with his fists, stabbing it and eventually killing it. Chuck's stamina is already less than 15%, and he activates the special attribute Accelerated Recovery. And finally, he and Caesar are left face to face, and the hero intends to destroy his enemy. He activates Massive Blast and hits it multiple times, dodging retaliatory attacks with divination. Caesar, who is already emitting deadly smoke, admits that he underestimated his rival. Both of them activate their most powerful abilities and scream at each other. Meanwhile, a huge mutant, like an octopus, squeezes the Transformer Kirk with its tentacles, whose left arm becomes incapacitated. Gorilla-like monsters surround Hercules on all sides. Caesar's assistant remarks with a smirk that it is useless to resist such a huge army of zombies. At that moment, the dome begins to crack, and the mutants think that their commander must have completed his ritual. However, the dome crumbles, and everyone sees Chuck standing over the defeated Caesar. The enemy was very strong, and if the hero had not recovered, he would not have been able to defeat him and get the blue catalyst. Caesar's assistant cannot believe in the death of his commander, and to prove this, Chuck shows him a stone. With the catalyst gained, the hero boosts all of his basic skills, raising them to B rank. As soon as the leader died, the zombies fell into turmoil, so now is the time to deal with them. Chuck decides to distract the monsters, and Norton must help with the retreat. He is confident that he can handle it alone, and will be able to escape to join the others in 2 days. ISO believes that Chuck should not be left alone, and at least a few awakened should stay with him. However, Norton relays the leader's orders to her, and believes that they must now believe in their commander. Seeing how Chuck fights his enemies, his allies realize that there is nothing to worry about, and retreat to the fortress. After 2 days of fighting, the hero, having found a place where he can take a little break, thinks that the zombies seem to have no end. Suddenly, Mon Mon flies up to him with a note that the fortress is ready, and Chuck needs to join the others. When he reaches the fortress, the guy is impressed by the work done. Stunned, the zombies watch as the whole city, standing on 8 huge iron legs, begins to move away. Sitting in the control center of a walking fortress, Rusha orders Wilson to show off the power of his creation. The robot turns on the destruction mode, and the muzzles of cannons and machine guns move out of the fortress in all directions, shooting enemies. To get rid of the monsters that cling to the legs of the walking fortress, Wilson turns on fire mode and burns them. Chuck is pleased. The investment spent on the project paid off, and Rusha believes that this is her greatest creation. Wilson asks the leader to establish the route of the fortress, and Chuck is faced with a choice: go straight to Seoul or do interior repairs. However, a sign that appears informs him of a new quest, the hunt for Erastos. Due to a series of defeats, the enemy is now extremely weak, and Chuck needs to capture the part of Seoul where he is resting, which will help weaken him even more. Having gathered all the leaders at the negotiating table, the leader informs them of his desire to move to Seoul and wants to know how much it is possible. In response to Monica's suggestion that it would be better to do the interior repairs now, Chuck tells everyone about the new task. After learning of Erastos' weakness, Hercules agrees with the idea of attacking him and is confident that all the gamers will support them. All the leaders support the idea, and Professor Kim suggests collecting as much information as possible to begin with. Chuck thanks everyone for their support in the decision to move to Seoul, and Monica goes to calm people down. A walking fortress reaches a ruined city teeming with various mutants, including flying ones. Noticing them above his head and instantly destroying them, Chuck thereby announces the beginning of the battle for Seoul. A man stands at the window and looks at the zombies walking down the street. Then he looks at his crying son in the arms of his exhausted wife. His daughter Sona is standing nearby, who, like her brother, is crying from hunger because there is nothing left to eat at home. Unable to stand it any longer, the man takes a backpack and a golf club and goes out the door to send him in search of food. Despite his wife's persuasion to stay, for the sake of his children, he still goes outside, stepping over the corpses of zombies lying everywhere. The man hides behind a garbage can, hoping that he will find something edible there, but suddenly his foot touches a can of soda. At the sound, monsters run in, and he begins to fight them off with his stick. However, a huge mutant is coming towards him, which the man obviously will not be able to cope with, and closing his eyes, he mentally asks for forgiveness from his children. However, after a couple of seconds, he hears the zombie growling, and realizing that he is still alive, opens his eyes and sees a robot spider killing the monster. Following the spider, soldiers appear, rushing into battle with zombies. When the man asks who they are, the soldiers tell him about the Union of Humanity, which intends to revive Seoul. Taking a megaphone in his hands, one of the soldiers calls on all the survivors to gather on their balconies and wait for help. The man rushes to him in horror because zombies can gather at the sound of the megaphone. But this is exactly what the soldier wanted, because he plans to get rid of all opponents at once. The man cannot believe how easily the members of the Union of Humanity deal with mutants. Wilson turns on the excavation mode and, having released huge drills from the bottom of the fortress, lowers them into the ground. After drilling the ground, the fortress sits on the territory chosen for temporary settlement. Soldiers emerge from the gates to meet the shocked survivors, inviting them to enter the Union of Humanity and receive food, clothing, and household goods. Sitting on a throne located on a mountain of human skulls, Erastos senses some unusual energy around him. Realizing that one of the districts of Seoul has been captured in less than a day, he is distressed that he needs time to recover from the loss of Caesar. Suddenly, Balkan comes to him, who decided to come to Earth to support Erastos. The high priest cannot believe that he managed to bypass the system and come here, and he wants to understand his true intentions. According to Balkan, he needs to take over Earth, or else the major faction, their power, will be in trouble. As a price for providing his power, he demands to get rid of Chuck, and Erastos agrees. Balkan reaches out to him and shares his power, enveloping the monster in a white mist. Upon completion of the capture of the first area, Commander Norton and Chuck discuss a further plan of action. Professor Kim runs into the office, reporting that all the monsters in Seoul have begun to move to the center, and they are all strange, as if they are performing some kind of ritual. Chuck realizes that if this is a movement of such a huge scale, then Erastos has begun to recognize them. The guy does not know what the enemy is up to, but decides to move in the direction of the center as well. Chuck and Wilson inspect the Han River, whose water level has skyrocketed due to the lack of a water control organization. Professor Kim warns the leader that he needs to be careful, because there are also mutants in the river that are able to breathe underwater. Chuck is confident that he will cope, because crossing the Han River is the fastest way to the central region. The leader gives the order, and Wilson directs the walking fortress to the water. Suddenly, the robot begins to sound the alarm, as extraneous movement has been detected in the river. Toothy mutant fish jump out of the water, Wilson activates the destruction mode, and the fortress begins shelling. Following the fish, a huge mutant octopus attacks them, and, connecting saws, the robot cuts its tentacles. Trying to bite through the iron frame of the fortress, the octopus breaks its fangs on it. Chuck orders Wilson to prepare all available weapons, but Rusha enters the office, informing him that they have an underwater robot prepared for such situations. Now, thanks to robotic sharks, they don't have to waste shells on underwater monsters. Opening the hangar, Wilson releases sharks into the water, which immediately rush into battle with the mutant octopus. After a while, Chuck sees their robotic assistants lifting the extracted catalyst to the surface of the water. When they reach the desired area, they do not see a dome in front of them, which resembles a protective barrier. The hero orders Wilson to activate long-range firing mode, but the dome is too strong, and the weapon is powerless in front of it. Deciding to take the dome by force, Chuck and his allies go to the fortress wall and suddenly hear a crack. The dome begins to crack, and they see Erastos underneath it, seated on a throne on a mountain of human skulls. Erastos rises to regain his true form and kill Chuck, as he promised the Balkans. The leaders of the Union of Humanity cannot believe their eyes. Now their opponent is several times larger than their entire fortress. Norton activates the command skill and orders his soldiers to stop panicking because they have trained so much for this day. As a result, morale and coordination of subordinates are significantly increased. Chuck realizes that Erastos has become much stronger, and now they are in for a life-and-death struggle. The fortress activates combat readiness, and the ranks of Kirk's army, transforming machines, are also lined up. Thousands of shots fly towards the monster, taunting that it can't wait to hear the screams of its opponents. Erastos directs the bullets back, but Wilson activates the interception system, and the fortress blocks the shots. The monster grabs Chuck and raises its huge hand over him, preparing to crush the guy. Clamps extend from the fortress, which grip Erastos' fingers, and the monster, unable to hold the hero, releases him. Rusha asks Wilson, who controls the arm, to hold on with all his might. Hercules activates the giant transformation skill and rushes to the aid of the leader of the Union. Ava follows him, trying to impress Erastos with her magic wand. Kirk, who controls the transformer, takes on the monster's tentacles, trying to shatter them. At the same time, Argolite summoned by Eve appears, trying to crush the other tentacles with its stone power. Both Union soldiers and spider robots join the fight, thrusting their sharp spears into Erastos' body. However, the defense is so strong that the spears break and the attack becomes impossible. Enraged, Erastos throws off all enemies in one move, and they fly down. Seeing this, Chuck, gaining strength, breaks free from the shackles and rushes at the monster, covering his eye with his hands. The most powerful blow fell on the hands of Erastos, which were shattered from the collision with the enemy's force. However, Chuck cannot believe his eyes. The wound instantly healed, and there is no trace of it left. Meanwhile, the head of the U.S. National Intelligence Agency asked for a report on the situation in China. According to Jack, the organization they considered in the last report is rapidly gaining strength, which is cause for concern. The chief is interested in how much harm there are awakened or mutants, but most of the satellites are out of order, and it is impossible to answer this question accurately. Suddenly, another employee asks the boss to come over to take a look at what is happening in Korea. Everyone present looks on in amazement at the giant robot fighting the largest mutant they have ever seen. Noticing a giant, a master of combat, and a child who can fly, the chief realizes that the United States should be wary not only of China, but also of Korea, where the awakened are far superior to them. CIA officers are surprised at how quickly the mutant recovers after being attacked by so many awakened. The CIA chief understands that if such monsters continue to rampage like this, then the United States will also be hit. However, suddenly the observers see a bright flash of light directly opposite the mutant. According to the tablet, Eratos' power had reached the limit of the current timeline, and outside interference was confirmed. Permission for correction has been granted, and within 2 hours the members of the Union of Humanity are granted special privileges. The awakened feel a surge of strength, and the wounds on their bodies begin to heal. Everyone suddenly notices how the hair on Chuck's head turns white, and his eyes turn glassy gray. In the next moment, his friends are speechless, because behind the hero's back, huge white wings open like an angel, a power granted as a privilege of the system. The destroyed parts of the walking fortress also begin to be restored. Eratos grabs Chuck by the wings, ready to tear him apart, but the guy puts up a strong resistance. Soldiers also rush to attack the monster, impaling it with harpoons and spears. While Erastos is attacked from all sides by Chuck's allies, an energy ball forms around the guy that cannot be squeezed. The monster's recovery rate does not keep up with the wounds inflicted on it, and very soon, wounded by all members of the Union, Erastos is no longer able to maintain his divine form. An explosion occurs, after which he regains his human body. Erastos begins to lament that Chuck is constantly interfering with him and preventing him from taking revenge, which could be good for him. Hercules considers it a very pitiful sight that the monster whines like a child. If they ever manage to meet again, Erastos promises to kill the leader of the Union in the most brutal way. Suddenly, the horizon splits into fragments, and the monster flies to the very place that Chuck and Monica have already seen once. The heroes rush after him to prevent Erastos from running again, but a winged girl with green hair blocks their way. According to her, they are not allowed to go there, since this is the dimension in which Erastos' body is sealed. She adds that the time has not yet come, and she and Chuck will definitely have a chance to meet. Erastos yells at the girl, scolding her for constantly disturbing him. Ordering the loser to shut up and disappear, she reaches forward and closes the portal. Turning back to Chuck, she greets him and praises him for his well-done tasks, noticing his prospects. The girl snaps her fingers, and a sign is again displayed in front of the hero, saying about the completed task and the calculation of the reward. Noticing the boy's confusion, she finally introduces herself, stating that she is what everyone calls the System. The girl wants to tell Chuck about the Holy Empire, which conquers other planets and destroys them. The System is the administrator of the dimension, and it helps such planets. Iso wonders why the Holy Empire, with such power and the ability to easily take over the planet, does not do so. As it turned out, Earth is the lowest ranking planet. There are few useful resources and a low density of measurement, which greatly limits the power of more powerful beings. Dimension density is the amount of mana, which is to them what oxygen is to humans, and the larger the creature, the more mana it needs. Hercules does not understand how, in this case, Erastos ended up here, because he was very strong and could not get to Earth. According to the System, Erastos is not that strong. Given the power of the Holy Empire, he is at the level of an officer at best. It turns out that the Empire cannot send forces that exceed the rank of dimension. If the Holy Empire does send forces that do not correspond to the rank of the planet, then the System intervenes. Not a single planet has ever been able to withstand the Empire. The union of mankind is the first to achieve such results. Kirk expresses his displeasure that the System did not help them before the zombie apocalypse began on Earth. As it turns out, it was limited at the time in order to be able to restore the balance. So as an apology, the System wants to share its strength with the Union. Chuck gains a special ability, Awakening, which has a cooldown time of 7 days. In addition, the System gives out 2 rewards that are added to the hero's inventory: the Tower of Babel and the public broadcast ticket. Thanks to the Tower of Babel, all members of Chuck's team can understand absolutely all languages. A ticket that can only be used once allows you to start broadcasting all over the planet, and the broadcast language will be automatically converted for the viewer. Both awards will help the Union of Humanity become known around the world. For Chuck, there's more good news. The Holy Empire is too busy dealing with the aftermath of countless wars, and since the System will focus more on protecting the Earth from now on, it will be extremely difficult for powerful beings to interfere. She tells Chuck about Balkan, the commander of the 3rd Corps of the Holy Empire Army, one of the most ardent war fanatics, who is part of the main echelon of the Empire's forces. The main echelon is made up of those who advocate war and plunder, and in recent years this group has become widely known in the Empire. They call themselves the Invincible March, which has never been defeated, and so they have been able to quickly increase their influence. One defeat can greatly shake their reputation, especially if it happens on such a low-ranking planet as Earth. Iso wonders if this means that they shouldn't worry about someone like the Balkans deciding to invade Earth in the future. The System confirms her guesses, because the Empire will be too busy with war in other dimensions. All that the Union of Mankind now needs to do is to put an end to the 7 officers of the Empire who remained on Earth. The System's time is running out. She wishes Chuck's team good luck and flies away. A sign appears in front of the hero again, which says about a new task: loosening the seal. After the departure of the System, the Union of Humanity continued to rescue the survivors of Sol, which had once again become the land of men. The occupation is over, and it's time to expand the Alliance's sphere of influence. Chuck decides to tell the world about the Union of Humanity using a ticket to the public broadcast. Now every person in all corners of the world can see his speech, which the hero begins by introducing himself as the head of the Union of Humanity. The broadcast is also seen by an elder from China who recognizes in Chuck the very opponent he already knew about. His excited assistant, who also saw the speech of the leader of the Union, flies up to him. The elder orders him not to panic but to stick to the original plan. The assistant believes that they will be able to distract the enemy's attention to revive the Heavenly Council. Prime Minister of Japan's right-hand man runs into the office to inform him of the failure of the mission to destroy Suminota, from which only a few awakened returned. At the very moment when the Premier thinks that all is lost for Japan, a broadcast also appears in front of him. A guy from Korea shows how his alliance managed to defeat a huge monster. The leader of the Union of Humanity notes that this is only the beginning, and there are still many battles ahead. To win these battles, Chuck calls for the whole world to unite and create a world union. The Prime Minister orders the ships to be ready immediately, because he needs the help of this alliance to save Japan. The broadcast time ends, but Chuck manages to say everything necessary to attract other countries to the Union. Monica praises him for the work he has done, but does not understand if he deliberately kept silent about the Holy Empire. According to Chuck, most likely, there are many organizations like the Immortal Cult around the world. In such a case, if he had told about the holy cult, it could have led to some countries voluntarily surrendering to the enemy. The Japanese prime minister arrives at the port of Busan, but the guards worry that there are too many monsters and they will not be able to break through them. But the prime minister is not worried because he brought with him the strongest awakened in the country, the girl Sato. Bowing to her, the head of the country says that he needs to get to Seoul, and she is the only one he can trust. Soldiers are excited to see live what a girl who fights zombies with the help of a cat is capable of. As it turns out, Momo the cat is a deity who combines his power with Sato. In front of the dumbfounded officers, Sato takes on the appearance of a cat, which deftly destroys zombies with its clawed paws. The girl clears the way for the prime minister's car so quickly that the driver, even at full speed, cannot catch up with her. Chuck and Iso are practicing in the yard when they begin to hear the very distant sounds of someone fighting. After activating the clairvoyance skill, the guy sees some strange creature rushing towards them at great speed. Before Chuck knows it, a girl with feline habits rushes to him, shouting that he smells delicious. Iso blocks her way, annoyed by Sato's interference, rushes at her, and they begin to fight. By separating them, the hero learns that the cat girl is a messenger from Japan with a very important message. Sato pulls out a note from the prime minister from the wide sleeve of his kimono and hands it to Chuck. At the moment when the guy is distracted by the letter, the cat girl suddenly licks him. Chuck blushes and pushes her away. Not understanding what is happening, Iso is beside himself with anger behind him. Shouting that time is apparently running out, the cat girl falls to the ground and a cat spirit comes out of her. Regaining his feline form, Momo greets Chuck, explaining that he is the creature that Sato summoned. The guy is worried about the condition of the girl lying on the ground, but the cat claims that she is perfectly fine and pushes her to wake her up. Waking up and remembering how she licked Chuck, Sato apologizes to him for what she did. At this moment, a car drives up to them, from which a man gets out, introducing himself as the Prime Minister of Japan. He is not going to beat around the bush and, falling on his knees in front of the leader of the Union of Humanity, asks for help for his country. The officers rush to the Prime Minister to raise him from his knees, but he is angry with them because they do not understand how deplorable the situation in Japan is. And now the entire delegation is on their knees in front of the guy, begging him for help. Chuck asks all of them to stand up immediately, threatening otherwise not to listen to them. The Prime Minister stands up, and the hero invites the guests to go to the office, where they can calmly discuss the situation. According to the Prime Minister, Japan is now a complete mess. Everything is filled with monsters and looters, calling themselves the New People. But the most terrible is the recently announced monster Suminot, which even Momo and Sato could not defeat. This gigantic monster is able to control wind, fire, and lightning. An armed army, ninjas, and 3 of Japan's best awakened ones, including Sato, came out to fight him for the last fight. However, neither shots nor numerous attacks had any effect on him. It repelled any attack, either drowning opponents or hitting them with an electric bolt of lightning. 2 of the best awakened died in the battle, and it was not difficult for Suminota to kill them. The soldiers took the blows to save the last awakened and give her the opportunity to escape. According to the Prime Minister, they lost almost all the military and the awakened in that battle, and without the help of the Union, Japan was finished. Chuck promises to help without asking for anything in return, because the first task of the Union of Humanity is to save as many survivors as possible. The Prime Minister thanks him and cannot hold back tears from the surging emotions. He solemnly swears to Chuck that Japan will always be a friend of the World Union, and the guy claims that this is quite enough. The hero asks Momo if Suminot had a dark blue magic stone in his forehead, and his guess turns out to be correct. Chuck decides to leave the fortress, because this is a great opportunity to test his new skill awakening. The guy's going to go to Japan, being sure that he can cope with Suminot alone. The Prime Minister believes that if Chuck really has the power that he saw on the broadcast, then he will succeed. Saying goodbye to Iso and Monica, the hero explains his decision to her by saying that they need to distribute their efforts correctly. According to the new task, 37% of zombies and 28% of mutants remain in Korea to weaken the seal of Esteros. Iso is confident that they can handle this task and asks Chuck to provide it to her. The leader asks Monica to check North Korea, since they may have to work there to fully complete the task. The professor promises to involve a reconnaissance group, and they say goodbye to Chuck. On the way, the Prime Minister reports that after reaching Busan, they will board a submarine to go to the habitat of Suminota. Chuck is interested in the same new people who were mentioned in the conversation by his new acquaintances. According to Sato, New People is a group led by Rechi Sakamoto. For clarity, Momo suddenly changes his form and turns into the villain that the girl is talking about. Even before the zombie incident, Reddy was sentenced to death. However, the problem is that he is a very strong Awaken. His abilities can be understood by hearing his nickname, Phoenix, because he is a pyrokinetic who can turn his body into flames. With this skill, he burned all of Hokkaido and became the absolute ruler of the region. According to the Prime Minister, madmen thrive precisely when the whole world is in ruins, and Reddy is the worst of all people. The Prime Minister wants to get rid of him even more than the zombies, but even the three best awakened could not cope with him. According to Chuck, this will be a great opportunity to use his new skill Withdrawal. He promises the Prime Minister to deal with the New People as soon as Sumanat is finished. The whole company gets to Kyoto, where it is constantly raining and where, according to information, there is a monster. Chuck asks the others not to follow him, as it could be dangerous, and entrusts Sato with protecting the Prime Minister. Grabbing a survivor, Sumanat grabs him and brings him to a huge toothy mouth, ready to devour him. At this moment, some unknown force forces him to unclench his hands and let the poor guy go. The man falls down, but he is caught by the hero who flew up, and then lowers him to the ground and orders him to run and save himself. Sumanat furiously raises his lightning staff and directs electrical discharges at Chuck. The guy activates clairvoyance and, opening his wings behind his back, maneuvers between lightning strikes. The battle begins and Chuck pushes the giant monster back with the first blow. The Prime Minister, who is watching what is happening, is convinced that asking the leader of the Union for help was the right decision. The angry monster gathers strength and summons a tornado that takes over everything around. The water almost reaches Sato and the Prime Minister, but the girl quickly orients herself and forms a sphere of protection around them. At the same moment, they notice with horror that the monster has changed shape, becoming many times more frightening and huge. Chuck rushes into battle without fear, but Sumanat is so fast that he manages to stab the guy in the cheek. After striking the boy with lightning and changing his form again, protected by an electric field, the monster heads towards the Prime Minister and Sato. The girl asks Momo to help her buy time so that the Prime Minister has time to escape. Kat thinks that they should run away too, but Sato doesn't want to listen to this, because if Chuck loses, they need to fight. Despite the fact that Momo does not like the idea of risking himself for the sake of the Prime Minister, he teams up with a girl to repel the monster's attack. However, after a couple of blows, Sato lies on the sand, defeated by Sumanat, who pins her to the ground with his paw. Sato yells at the Premier to run away, but the monster that spots him is already on his way after the man. Catgirl grabs the monster by the leg, surprising him with incredible strength. Sumanat swings his sickle arm over her to finish her off, but immediately freezes under the influence of some force. It was Chuck who activated the Magic Girl skill, confusing the opponent. Next, the guy activates electric resistance, speed, strength, and stone skin. Taking advantage of the enemy's confusion, Chuck rushes at him, not letting go of the magic wand. With all his strength, he strikes Sumanat in the face, leaving a deep dent in it. Chuck helps Sato get up, who can't believe that the guy has a funny children's toy in his hands. The monster that has come to his senses sends a huge tsunami wave to the hero. However, the guy conjures a protection around himself, which does not allow the water to even approach him. A fierce struggle begins again, in which Chuck soon wins. A few minutes later, he is already standing in front of Sato, smiling and holding a blue magic stone in his hand. The tablet says that this catalyst has amazing power and is able to increase the gear level to A rank. By leveling up, Chuck goes beyond the human framework and gains the first transcendent trait. A heart of mana has been created, the mana regeneration rate has been doubled, and its amount has been tripled. Then Chuck gets the second transcendental trait, the intensification of the five senses. He easily sees a close-up of an ant in the distance and clearly hears him eating grass. The hero is approached by Sato, Momo, and the Prime Minister, who thanks him for his help. The guy believes that it is too early to thank him because he still needs to deal with the new people. Everyone is surprised that Chuck is going to go to Hokkaido right now, and Sato promises to show him the way. Meanwhile, in Hokkaido, several members of the new people have captured one of the survivors. Threatening him with a weapon, they force the guy to come in and check one of the buildings for zombies. Entering the warehouse, the guy does not notice anything in it except rotten vegetables. Finding nothing but a disgusting smell there, he reports it to the gang. However, in the next moment, the mutant's long tentacles grab the guy and drag him inside. Members of the new men shoot zombies along with the person they captured. Entering the warehouse, they happily take both of the red catalysts they received as a result of the kill. Having captured 2 more new prisoners, they send them on a new mission on pain of death. At that moment, Chuck, Sato, and Momo, wagging his tail, head towards them with a confident step. Members of the group, pointing weapons at them, order them to stop. Chuck analyzes them and, as expected, learns that he is facing human magic stone eaters. The leader of the gang points guns at the arrivals and, receiving no answer as to who they are, declares that he will shoot. Chuck smiles ominously and, without hesitation, with an impudent grin, offers to shoot him. The bandit shoots, but the hero activates the 5 senses skill and, seeing the pellets flying at him in great detail, deflects it with his hand. The leader orders the rest of the gang to shoot, but before he knows it, all his friends are lying on the ground. He starts shooting at Chuck, but he flies at him, grabs him by the throat, and starts strangling him. Lifting him by the neck, the boy asks where he can find Reichi Sakamoto. Phoenix and his companions, the new men, former prisoners sentenced to death, celebrate their victory over Hokkaido. Suddenly, the wall behind them collapses with a crash, and a guy dressed in a black suit appears in the opening.